who is ideological
finding the truth
and use the word Antifa.
This is what they do.
Battling
They're
mainstream.
liars. The woke mob, all they can do is lie. These are the front lines. Welcome to TPUSA Live. My name is Drew Hernandez, host of Frontlines. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up for you on the live stream today. Here on Frontlines, it doesn't get much more disturbing than this. We're diving into some of the explicit and inappropriate resources teachers in America are being encouraged to use to teach young kids about sex, gender identity, and more. Then we'll send it over to the TPUSA Live couch with guest host Isabel Brown. Today, the contributors are talking about the COVID lockdowns in Shanghai and how TikTok is ruining the country. After that, Jack Posobiec is digging into the latest surrounding Project Veritas and their lawsuit. Morgan Zegers and Connor Clegg are discussing Federalist Paper number 24 in today's episode of Freedom Papers. Then Alex Clark has all the tea on Jada and Will as the fallout from Slapgate continues. But remember, Frontlines is now available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and other streaming services. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star review right now, and support the show. My name is Drew Hernandez, and you are now on the front lines. All right, America, teachers are using child grooming YouTube channel on little kids. Listen, I've been talking about this day in, day out, every single day on this show, exposing what is taking place in the so-called education system throughout the United States of America, where now they're openly targeting, not just targeting children, they're actively grooming them, and they hide it behind what they call education. But now they've got YouTube channels that teachers are being recommended to use that are pretty depraved. It's extremely inappropriate. I have the great Nerdrotic Gary that's going to comment on this. But first, I want you to see these clips. They're insane. Take a look.
Your parents can be really good resources. They've been through it before themselves, and they love you and want you to be safe and happy. Having at least one adult that you trust that you can talk to about things that are happening or how you're feeling can be really, really helpful. Some people find that a parent, grandparent, older sibling, or aunt can be very helpful. Others find it uncomfortable talking about feelings and asking personal questions with a relative. So if this is the case, a teacher, coach, older sibling, or parent of a friend may be someone you can talk to and help you safely navigate adolescence. But some adults aren't very good listeners. Sometimes they like to talk and tell young people how to feel and what to think. Sometimes adults don't believe young people when they say they're depressed, angry, or even in love. But there are adults who will listen. It's really important for you to find an adult who respects you enough to listen to what you have to say. Someone who can remember what it's like to be young and can help you without judging you or trying to always tell you what to do.
Joining me now is Gary Nerdrotic. Bro, I didn't tell you about this clip. I wanted your reaction right out the gate, dude. What are your thoughts?
They're groomers. It's unbelievable. Like, hey, don't trust this adult who remembers what it's like to be a kid. I mean, I kind of see where they're getting at, but considering everything we've seen, and you and I have talked about even before, like this show and before this Florida bill that just passed, right, was brought up. We saw this going on with Disney. It's very strange that they insist on wanting to talk to children about sexual matters. And when they're an entertainment company, that's all they are. They are supposed to make us laugh, make us forget our troubles. They were about escapism, but now they are infotainment. They have become a platform for influence. And they have made no secret of this, Drew, and you've covered that quite a bit as well. And they're doing it through Marvel films, Star Wars films, comic books. It's everywhere. And that's the first time I saw it. I can't believe it, man.
Gary, okay, you and I have talked about this before. You've been heavily involved in like the comic world. You've done some creating. You've seen how things work behind the scenes, like in Hollywood, or how things are created. When you see videos like this, it is clear that there are people that are intentionally creating this type of content to literally target children. You look at like the little characters, Gary, and they're like, oh, you should find an adult that you should trust. And like the eyes are all big and creepy, and it's like these weirdos with giant smiles. And it's like, that should scare a child, but these people are intentionally trying to target children to make it seem like this creepy, weird garbage is normal.
They want to normalize it. That's the whole point. They want to normalize this. And, you know, I mean, it's in a way, it's good that the mask is off, like completely off at this point, because this is just something we suspected. We saw hints here and there. And sure, I'm sure there is a well-meaning, dumb liberal out there who has probably pretty decent intentions, but has no clue on like how life actually works. Maybe doesn't have kids. I see a lot of people talking about this who don't. Most parents want what's best for their child. They will deal with this situation. No, not all parents are going to listen. And that's what Disney knows. So that's why they're making this socially engineering propaganda to get to those kids. To what? To what end? To, I don't know, increase your numbers? I'm not really sure why you want to get them at a very impressionable age. And again, you know, what sparked this is the Florida bill. We're talking about kids from 5, 6 years old to 8 years old who barely know how to wipe their nose and have Velcro shoes. But we're going to talk about like gender issues with them. Oh my God. I haven't even seen this channel.
Okay, Gary, let's take a look into this. Let's do a deep dive, all right? So this is not Disney. This is a YouTube channel that is being recommended by school districts for teachers to use to indoctrinate their children. On their website, they're called Amaze, okay, Gary? So on their website, here's a quote from their website. Amaze envisions a world that recognizes child and adolescent sexual development as natural and healthy. A world in which young people everywhere are supported and affirmed, and the adults in their lives communicate openly and honestly with them about puberty, reproduction, relationships, sex, and sexuality. Notice how they just like leave the parent out. They leave the parent out of the equation. I mean, as a parent, Gary, you see this stuff and you're like, what the hell are these people trying to do? Why are they trying to indoctrinate my children? They want to touch my kids. It should piss everybody off at this point. It's disgusting.
And it's been going on in California for a while. You know, it's one of the reasons I left. This is something what Florida was trying to protect with their bill. Like, it's something that they do in California. They talk to kids at very early ages about these things. This has been pushed for years now, and they try to politicize it, and they try to hide it behind the shield of the politicized rainbow flag, right? So what they do is they say you're homophobic if you're not wanting to talk about these things to children. Of course, it's fine. You know, I believe kids are born gay. I think they figure it out pretty much the same time we figure stuff out. And we talk to our parents. No, not every parent is going to be available to talk to. Of course not. But there's aunts, uncles, and those are individual situations. It's not a situation where we want YouTube channels. By the way, YouTube, didn't they pass a rule about COPA? Like, you couldn't make stuff. It damn near, like, people thought it was going to wreck the platform for a while. People were pretty scared because of the COPA law, and I don't know if they could monetize it. I saw one video had 172,000 views. Did you catch that one about the consent? You know, so it's getting watched, it's getting recommended. I mean, some of the views aren't that great, but if I'm not surprised schools are recommending this, and I wouldn't be surprised if every single school in California is recommending this.
It's crazy, Gary. They're like teaching kids on these videos how to like use condoms, how to determine if you're ready to have sex. It's pretty insane that this is targeted at children, Gary. I mean, it's like, oh, hey, little kid, you know, if you're confused, if you don't know whether you want to have sex or you want to talk about your gender identity, don't go to mom and dad, just go to a mechanic. Go to it's like, what the hell? Why does my child need to go to a mechanic to talk about their sexuality, Gary? Am I crazy? Am I the only one that's sitting here watching this stuff like, no, what the hell? This is wrong. Put a stop to it.
Yeah. I mean, I am not the kind of, I'm just for people who might not know, I'm not like a super religious person. I cover pop culture. I've just noticed more of this through films, television that I watch quite a bit of. And yes, they are trying to break up the American family. That is clear as day. They want to separate children from their parents. It is part of an entire concept that school boards run by teachers unions want to push. It's Marxist concepts. And like, this is stuff I thought I would be. If I heard this stuff 4 years ago, I'd have thought you were insane. Absolutely insane. But times have changed. It is absolutely part of it. They want to break up the American family. And unsolicited advice, I don't even know if I'm allowed to do this. Well, I'll tell you what I did with my kid. I pulled my kid out of public school. That my kid is never going back to public school. My kid's special needs, and he needs it. And we're going to have to find something. And we've been figuring it out. And it's not easy, but it's better than keeping him there. It's better than keeping him there.
Absolutely at this point, Gary, because it's like these people are teaching little kids, like, hey, if you want to have this kind of conversation, and if you feel uncomfortable doing it with your mom and dad, just go to your mechanic. Listen, no one in their right mind, Gary, whether it's gay, heterosexual, trans, whatever, no one in their right mind that's not the parent should be like, yeah, I want to have some kind of sexualized conversation with a little kid. Like, hey, yeah, come here, little Johnny, sit on daddy's lap and let's talk about whether you're gay or not. It's like, dude, why? Why would anybody want to do that? You must be some kind of only pedophiles, only sick, twisted people, Gary, want to do stuff like this. Let's shift gears because Bob Chapek is now on this wavelength, and we've been seeing this, and I was asking you about this the other day. This has gone way too far, Gary. I know you cover everything, like you said, from Star Wars all the way to everything Disney's putting out. Everything's woke. It's the MCU. Everything's just dying that we're seeing. What are you seeing? Where does this go, Gary? This has gone beyond politics. And it's happening in Disney at this point, and they're defending it. Where do you see this going?
Last year, I thought it was bad last year, and I said it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And I think things are turning around. It's always darkest before it's done, but I think, I know that they overstepped on this one. Disney absolutely overstepped with the Florida bill. Bob Chapek initially wanted to be quiet, then they just piled on. He bent the knee, and now the guy just looks pathetic. He looked like a hostage. And Rufo's leaked videos on Twitter, and that guy's been doing the Lord's work. Thank you, by releasing that and showing us what Disney's all about. And they have a not so secret gay agenda. And again, I'm not against that being in anything adult at all. We're talking about children. And they just keep pushing and pushing, giving them an inch. They take a mile, and it's up to us, the customer, the paying customer. I don't like the word consumer, although it's probably applicable, to stop going to Disneyland, Disney World. That's where they make their money. You need to cancel your trips. You need to boycott this stuff. You need to stop it. I've never called for that stuff before, but if you actually want it to really change, it will. I think there will be a time where Hollywood's they're going to lose too much money. They're going to have to dial it back a little bit, but it's never going to be, they'll dial it back and then they'll try to push it forward a little bit. And maybe it just needs to die. I hope not. Yeah. I like this stuff. I at most of the time it was, listen, when I was a 5-year-old or 6-year-old, were you thinking about, I wasn't thinking about girls. I wasn't. I barely remember because I'm old, but I was thinking about Spider-Man. I wanted to be Spider-Man when I grew up. So you're going to have that kind of.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking if Spider-Man was a homosexual or something. I just liked that he had superpowers. You know what I mean? Gary, it's just like, dude, do you really think that Disney, there's more of us than there are of them. Yes. Okay? There's more of us sane thinking people that are like, this has gone way too far. Don't touch the kids. We got to draw a line in the sand. Listen, we can't draw a line in the sand when Disney is openly making child pornography. That's where these people are going at this point, okay? That's not when we say boycott Disney. The line has to be drawn now where they're protecting child groomers and they're opposing child grooming laws. Okay, so Gary, what is it with these people, in your opinion? It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Why are they siding with the minority rather than the majority that's thinking clearly here, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's extortion. They decided to let the wolf in the door remember Rufo exposed Disney for having basically CRT training. They said they got rid of it, but the name of that training was, I forgot what the name was, but the logo was on Bob Chapek's hostage video. It was right there. So they obviously didn't get rid of it. I know Amazon still has it. I know Warner Brothers has that training. I know Paramount has that training because I've seen the paperwork. So they're caught in a corner. It was all about appeasement. I do believe a lot of people in Hollywood believe this crap. They are absolutely cultists, and I think other ones are just shallow, vapid people who will say whatever they need to say to stay relevant. But now they're caught. They're caught in something that's kind of unprecedented now. They've always been on the liberal side. That they just have. But it's, most of the time it was dealt pretty neutrally, in my opinion. But now they have completely overreached. Disney has chosen a side, a hill to die on that's clearly unpopular with the American public, the UK public. I mean, like pretty much everywhere. And it's because they let the wolf in the door. They went so hard. And this is Bob Iger has a lot of responsibility here. Holds a lot of responsibility. I don't have a lot of sympathy for Bob Chapek, but if I had a little bit, it was because Bob Iger set all this up. Yeah. And this was all because Disney could not innovate anymore. They were just buying stuff. And then they decided, hey, Marvel's really popular. Let's social engineer through it. Let's social engineer through Star Wars. And now, as the tide's turning, they cannot go back. And where does it go? Lots of flops. I think it goes to where lots of we're starting to see it. Bad television shows that are not popular. Marvel is lost its shine, and they're going to be forced to make a financial decision at some point through shareholders. Absolutely.
Gary, I guess this is what they meant by reimagining tomorrow. I guess, like really changing the entire landscape of America. This is ridiculous, but isn't it crazy that, I mean, you take a look at that Bob Chapek video, looks like someone's got a gun to his head, like literally, right? And he says, I got with my LGBTQ advisory board. They spoke to me, like literally re-educated and they did the same thing to Gina Carano, remember? They did the same thing where they had these LGBTQ advocates even go to her house in an attempt to re-educate and reprogram her mind to get her to think clearly. But she took a stand. She said no. She stood on her values. I think that's what we need to do, Gary. We need to stand and be like Gina Carano and say, no, we're not going to bow down to the woke mob. We're going to stand for our values, especially now even more for the children. Final word, Gary.
Gina Carano is a hero in a lot of ways. Yes, she's a celebrity, but she risked her entire career to do what she thought she was right, what was right. And she's just got bigger metaphorical stones than anybody in Hollywood. And we should follow her lead. I absolutely agree. She's went off and done her own thing and actually gotten more popular because of it. Now she's going to comic conventions and not getting canceled. That's where the tide turns. Yes, we have to say no. I've already done that. I cover pop culture and I give the minimal amount to Disney. I think it's like a couple of bucks a month. And that still makes me sick a little bit, but I have to cover my pop culture. But the other stuff I don't. I gave up a lot of things I liked. And it's not hard because I have to go out of my way to buy comic books, to go to movies. And I can just easily just stay home and save my money. It's that easy to stop Disney. Disney's not providing water. Okay, they're not providing electricity. Yeah. They're not making food. They are making housing in Florida.
In Florida,
that's how we stop it. And keep talking, keep speaking your mind. And I'm just an idiot with a microphone who started in my house. Anybody can do this, and the more of us do this on YouTube, the more common sense that's out there, we can drown out the insanity.
You are effective, Gary. You are literally on the front lines. I've told you guys and the whole team, Ryan, Geeks and Game, I've told you guys, I've said this. You guys have always been on the front lines of this pop culture information war, literally. Where can people find you, follow you, if they don't already know who you are? The Friday Night Tights, the Nooners, all that good stuff.
That is on YouTube, a channel called Nerdrotic. And you can find me on Twitter at Nerdrotics. Right there. There you go. And that's where I mostly am. So, yeah, if you would like to, and we do a show called Friday Night Tights in conjunction with Geeks and Gamers and Heel versus Babyface. And we have guests like Drew Hernandez on. And it's a lot of fun Friday nights at 1 p.m. Pacific.
Awesome. Gary, I'll talk to you. I'll text you after this. Thank you for joining me, man.
Thanks, brother. Take care.
All righty, take care. There he goes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not getting any better. And it's getting worse. But I don't need to tell you. I know you are feeling it. Inflation is out of control, and we're seeing it more than ever right now in the grocery store. If you're looking to save money without sacrificing quality, then you need to check out Good Ranchers. Their prices on 100% American meat have remained affordable, and their quality beats the store every time. Right now, you can save money, get steakhouse quality meat, and donate $50 to TPUSA by visiting goodranchers.com/TPUSA. With your purchase, you donate $50 to TPUSA. Make your donation and get great quality meat today. Go to www.goodranchers.com/TPUSA to combat inflation with fair-priced American meat delivered by Good Ranchers today. All right, America, let's continue. Child predators are flooding your schools. If you're a leftist, if you clicked the link on my Twitter and you found yourself watching this show live, or you're watching the rebroadcast and you're like, what are you talking about, you homophobe? We just want to be able to say the word gay. You're just a bigot. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that children should not be groomed. If you take a look at the public education system, you're seeing pedophiles come out left and right. You like that little pun there? It's not a political issue. This is an issue that deals with our babies in the United States of America. And rapists, pedophiles, do they have a political leaning? I think you see them on both sides. They're on the left, they're on the right. These people are evil, and they have one goal, common goal in mind. And what is that? To target little kids, to molest, rape, and violate them. And you're seeing them come out in the public education system, and I'm going to show you that. But New Jersey, breaking news here from the Daily Wire themselves, New Jersey school district doubles down on hiding student gender identity from parents, and they cite possible child abuse if revealing gender identity to the parents. This is from the Daily Wire. Yet another state is telling teachers they can hide students' gender identity from their parents unless the student gives permission for their parents to know. Very interesting. The New Jersey Education Department's official guidance on the subject states that, quote, a school district shall accept a student's asserted gender identity. Parental consent is not required. I repeat, parental consent is not required, end quote. There's another quote from this district. School district personnel should have an open but confidential discussion with the student to figure out the student's preference on matters such as chosen name, chosen pronoun to use, and parental communications, the guidance said. Here's where it gets pretty interesting. The Daily Wire reports, furthermore, school districts should be mindful of disputes between a student and their parents over gender identity, the guidance says. It refers districts to the Education Department's Child Abuse, Neglect, and Missing Children webpage for more resources. Do you see what these people are doing? They are painting parents as the villains, the domestic terrorist, the child abuser, without even giving the opportunity for the parent to even have the conversation with the child first. The state is getting in between you and your kids, and it's disgusting. It's dark. It's evil. I don't care what your politics are, whether left or right, the state has no right to counsel your child without your consent and to keep it from you at that. Does anybody think that this is normal right now? If you say, no, it's not normal, yeah, because it's not. This should not be happening. These people think in their high and mighty mindsets, their pedophilic mindsets, that they have the right to have this sacred, very sacred position between you and your child. They themselves want to have that. This is what's happening in New Jersey. Now, you might be sitting here and saying, dude, you're just being fear-mongering. You're just trying to scare me. You're just some crazy right-winger conspiracy theorist that says there's a pedophile under every single rock. Well, if you've been paying attention lately, pedophilia has been openly exposed. Hollywood, it's being exposed in many industries throughout the United States of America. It's nothing new. People are just finally starting to see it. But also in the public education system. You are seeing multiple pedophiles. You are seeing multiple child molesters being exposed. Here's one of them from Florida. A 35-year-old school teacher, Jeffrey Tom Sulo, a former educator who used to teach at Stewart Middle School in Stewart, Florida, has been found guilty Thursday on charges of sexual battery of a 13-year-old who was a student of his. He was arrested back in 2018 and was fired from his teaching job at the time. The ex-teacher has now been convicted of sexual battery on a child. Based on the authority, this is what he's done. Here's another one out of California. A 35-year-old, Anessa Gower, was taken into custody by the Richmond Police Department. She was charged with 29 counts of lewd acts with children, including statutory rape. Her victims were 7 boys. This is on both sides of the gender spectrum. Ages 15 to 16, the boys were. Police say the charges are sex-related, some social media communications related, and inappropriate contact with minors. Here's another one. Another one from Florida. A Florida high school history teacher, 39-year-old Derek Stribling, has been arrested for having sexual correspondence with 2 female students aged 18 and 14 and allegedly molesting the 14-year-old at the school. And here's a clip of a teacher exposing what they're doing in New Jersey, teaching kids to masturbate.
Here's an example of next year what a first grade lesson might look like. It's called Pink, Blue, Purple, and you can see it's slated for first grade to take about 30 minutes, and the range of ways people express their gender. So the objective is to define gender, gender identity, and gender role stereotypes, and then talk to them about how if you could feel like you're a girl, even if you have what's called boy parts or girl parts, and you can feel like a girl even if you have boy parts. Other one that is concerning a lot of parents is a maze. If you go to YouTube and type in a maze into the search bar, it's going to give you all of the video clips that are designed for teachers to be able to show in class. One of the videos talks about porn and how it's okay and it's free. So here you can see some of the video titles. It's mixed in with other videos. One of the new 5th grade standards is talking about masturbation. That's also in here. Gender identity, growing up awkward. The real thing parents need to do is talk to teachers, talk to the supervisors in your district, get to know what materials will be used for next year, watch the curriculum maps, and go to school board meetings.
And there you have it. It all comes full circle, doesn't it? That's the same YouTube Gary and I just talked about at the top of this show, exposing a maze that they want to target children with little videos to teach them if they're ready to have sex or to how to use a condom or how to masturbate. This is just totally normal, isn't it? Teaching little kids how to sexually touch themselves. No, it's not normal. It's disgusting. And this is why we are exposing this, because there are pedophiles in the public education system. Just showed you to them, being leaked by the day. These are the people that are happy right now. These are the people that are opposing the don't say gay bill. No, it's an anti-child grooming law. It's meant to protect the children from people like this that we're showing you. It's designed to protect children from pedophiles in the public education system, because who are the ones that are going to take advantage of having a leniency to be able to have secret conversations with little kids without the parents knowing? Oh, it's going to be a responsible adult. Oh, it's going to be someone that's definitely not going to take advantage of a child. Oh, yes, it's going to be someone that is going to fully respect the boundaries as if the parents were there. Do you honestly believe that? If you do, you don't live in reality. We live in an evil, dark world, and you are starting to see the realities of these evil and dark agendas unfolding day in and day out. Protect the children, cancel Disney, and cancel anybody that cannot get get behind protecting children from pedophiles and being groomed. The line will be drawn in the sand here, period. We will not tolerate this any longer, because if we cannot protect the children, we have literally nothing. My name is Drew Hernandez. These are the front lines, and TPUSA Live starts right now.
Thanks, Drew. Hey everyone, once again, welcome to TPUSA HQ in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Isabel Brown, filling in for John Root, who's at his friend's wedding on the island of Maui. So we're all channeling some great island energy here this Monday in Phoenix. Here's what we're covering today on TPUSA Live. First, in the daily briefing, we're going into all the government lockdowns in Shanghai, China, as the Chinese government tries to also gain nuclear strength. Next, our couch will introduce you to a new segment called Mondays in the USA, where we'll show off the greatness of America. Then we'll discuss how the Chinese-operated app TikTok is now starting to erode kids' brains. Afterwards, we're taking you through woke indoctrination starting in almost kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all the grade levels. It's crazy, talking sex and sexuality in another segment called Failings of America's Children. These people are sick, as you just heard from Drew. Finally, Christopher Phillips from the Chicago Thinker will join us to discuss his viral video challenging Brian Stelter in One Last Thing. Buckle up, TPUSA Live from HQ starts now.
Authentic, unfiltered, grassroots content and conversation every weekday. Live from Phoenix, Arizona at the Turning Point USA headquarters, this is TPUSA Live.
Welcome to the very gross warmth of Phoenix, Arizona. It's like 90 degrees this week already, which I'm not ready for.
It's a dry heat.
It's a dry.
We're
That's what we
contractually
all
obligated
say.
to say that.
I'm from the state of Colorado. I miss cold weather at this point in the year. We are joined by an awesome panel today. We got Connor Clegg, producer of The Charlie Kirk Show. You ready to talk all things TikTok later?
I am.
Sure.
We're going to tick it off.
Going head to head. Excited about that. Lily Stanley, who you've seen on the program before. And we're joined by our friend Ian Haworth.
Yeah, you
not
got it right.
Ethan Hawthorne, as I've heard other people have said in the past. I'm so excited to finally have you here with us at TPUSA Live.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a dry heat. It's a bit unpleasant. But me suffering through American weather I'm used to it now.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Ian is part of the personality lineup over at the Daily Wire. We've known each other for several years through the internet, but excited to finally be here in person together. And we have a great lineup of conversations for you guys today. I want to kick things off right away with everything happening in Shanghai. I actually didn't even know this was happening until last night, which is incredibly alarming to me that nobody in media is remotely covering this, but nearly 20,000 cases of COVID were reported last week in China's biggest city, Shanghai. It's another near record high since the beginning of the pandemic. Interestingly, only about 800 of them are symptomatic cases. Great. But even so, they've gone ahead and shut down the entirety of Shanghai. Residents are forbidden from leaving their homes. The lockdown was promised to end on April 5th. As we know, it's April 11th, and things are so desperate for citizens of Shanghai that they are running out of food, they're running out of necessities like medication to keep them alive if they have chronic illnesses. And many people psychologically are suffering from this so much that they're actually jumping off their balconies and committing suicide, we're hearing some reports of. So I want to get your guys' take on this. Do you think this is justified? Are we really trying to slow the spread of this disease? And do you think these lockdowns are coming back to other parts of the world? Ian, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's a perfect metaphor for what China is in terms of they do not care about their own people. They're still standing by this policy, by the way. People are throwing themselves off balconies, and they're saying, no, this is kind of zero policy we're covering. They're accusing the Western countries of a lay-down policy where they're letting people die. Apparently, people starving to death or throwing themselves on balconies doesn't count as dying. But this is also what the left generally in the United States wants to see as the gold standard for what they want to achieve. It's like full government control of every single element of your life. Ultimately, though, I'm not particularly surprised. This is China. Like, this is the same country that let tens of millions of its own citizens starve to death when they moved into communism. This is the same political party that murdered babies, like discarded babies in the street, forced people to have abortions, took babies away, sold them into adoption in the West. this really isn't anything new. It's just we're seeing it now for the first time on social media.
Yeah.
The veil is being pulled back, but it's obviously awful to watch.
I'm glad it is, and it's hard for us, I think, to wrap our head around just how authoritarian that government is. They're actually telling people you can't even leave your home for grocery shopping. So sorry if you are out of food, the government will bring it to you, allegedly. We obviously know that they're not.
6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, they're taking away children from their parents if the children or parents test positive for COVID. So talk about abduction of children again. Lily, what is your reaction to this?
Worse than that, you know, a lot of people tend to overlook the human condition that this causes, and they're really appalled by what they're doing to the animals. They're literally bagging cats in the street. Like, if you test positive, they're taking your animals. If they're dogs, they put them in this giant bin and they're electronically killing them. Like, with this giant zapper, I saw a video of it. It's got like these 2 long prongs, super dystopian, just dead. Killing dogs, putting them into this giant thing, and then all the cats are rounding up in bags, like 50 per laundry bag, and just leaving them on the side of the road and then hauling them off eventually. But if the human condition isn't compelling enough for you, I've seen a lot of people share the videos of these animals and what they're doing to them. So you'd think one would be more important than the other. Both are horrendous. But I mean, again, we're not shocked. Nothing
Perhaps one of the weirdest things I heard about last night was that the city's actually flying surveillance drones around the whole city to spy on you and make sure that you're not leaving your house or going grocery shopping, God forbid, or just getting some fresh air for a second. That feels really Orwellian to me, and I'm curious, Connor, what your thoughts are.
Well, yeah, it feels very Orwellian, and but the thing is, one of you said earlier, just a second ago, I've been kind of lost in thought here, because it is shocking, it's terrifying, it's disgusting, but it doesn't sound all that different from what we've seen in the United States. I mean, give or take a few weeks for the food delivery, and then, you know, it's a little bit stricter over there, obviously. They are communists. Outright communists. But we did this too, to our own people. We saw a massive spike in suicides. They were just doing it in kind of the darkness of their own homes instead of jumping off the balcony.
Well, it's still happening too.
But it's still happening. Yeah, this is China. We shouldn't be surprised. But maybe we know where Anthony Fauci's been for the past few months. Maybe he's been in Shanghai instituting this new policy, because it looks eerily similar to what we saw in the United States over the past 2 years.
And he's back out of nowhere doing the media
now
circles
back,
saying,
Well,
we
they're
may
still
have
singing
more
China's
lockdowns.
praises. Well, that's what's wild, is that every
is.
opportunity that Trudeau or Biden or anybody gets to sing the praises of China, they're still doing that despite these terrible videos that just keep surfacing in our media.
We have one of those videos for you guys right now of what it looks like to have those drones flying around your apartment building. Let's take a look. That is terrifying.
Sounds
None
nice,
of them
though.
have a firearm. You could just shoot it out of the sky and give everyone a.
That's so eerie. Just
peace.
like, stay inside your homes. Do not leave. We are watching you. Not a fan. Meanwhile, in the midst of all of this, locking down millions upon millions of people in their homes and practicing probably the weirdest allegory to 1984 I've ever seen, China also announced that they're stockpiling their nuclear weapons at a very alarming rate right now. So over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal did a whole report on this. It was a really interesting coverage of this. And they reported that the communist nation is accelerating the development of more than 100 suspected missile silos, each reportedly able to house missiles with nuclear tips that all have the ability to reach the shores of the United States of America. Absolutely terrifying. We're talking about DF-41 long-range missiles here. Think about it this way. So the bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima in 1945 had a roughly 17 kiloton yield. It's estimated that these missiles have a 5,000 kiloton yield. So when we talk about the potential destruction from these weapons, it's crazy to me that all of this is happening, but our media is not covering it at large. Really, the Wall Street Journal is the only coverage I've seen in depth of this. But they're also locking down their own citizens, putting them in concentration camps, taking away their babies and killing their pets and flying around drones all at the same time. And no one has anything to say about it.
Well,
That's shocking.
Isabel, obviously, because Putin is the bigger threat, don't you know, right?
Apparently.
Yeah, so invading Ukraine is much more of a compelling news story and a threat to the United States of America than China stockpiling nuclear weapons, right?
It reminds me of last week with the UN, the Security Council, or not the Security Council, the Human Rights Council voted to oust Russia from the UN Council on Human Rights. China's still in there.
And Cuba, Venezuela, all these wonderful places to live.
It's so incredible because such a cognitive dissonance sets in when you talk about foreign countries and understanding what's happening in situations like this. Because even like Connor had mentioned, where we've seen this type of behavior in America alone, when you think about China and you think about these other countries, it doesn't seem real. Like, you can't really grasp it. So that's why I think so many people are, even the people that are reporting it, people just aren't caring because it doesn't seem like, it still doesn't seem real. It's like there's no way. There's no way they're bagging cats on the road and people are jumping off their balcony because they haven't eaten
they're
in
going
3
to eat
days.
them later.
Right, there's no way. So once people start to see or feel that effect, then maybe they'll have something to say about it and be largely concerned. But until then, yeah, I guess we'll just keep talking about the Ukraine.
Well, you also have the issue of every single one of these issues comes down to Biden. Like, there's a reason Ukraine happened. It's because Biden is terrible on the foreign policy front.
Correct.
There's a reason they're ramping up nuclear production in China is because they know they'll probably get away with it if they invade Taiwan now.
Right.
We saw Afghanistan. Biden basically set fire to it on his own, handed it back to a bunch of people
Literally.
who live in caves with like small firearms. It's ridiculous. But all this is because of Biden. And I think that's why the media just doesn't like to deal with these things, because fundamentally they all come down to one guy who they got elected. And so
Interesting.
they don't want to scratch at that scab.
Well, our media seems to be playing every side of all of these issues, so I'm anxious to see how they'll cover it in the next few weeks, especially if an invasion of Taiwan may or may not happen. There's a fun invasion, though, of Tampa, Florida, happening this summer with students from across the nation for our Student Action Summit. We have a fun little promo to share with you guys. Let's check it out.
Calling all based patriots, meme lords, and conservatives, Student Action Summit is happening 2022, Tampa, Florida, July 22nd through the 24th. You don't want to miss it. You'll make lifelong friends, you'll probably meet your soulmate, and you'll be able to network with the biggest names in the conservative movement. Sign up now on TPUSA.com.
An invasion of meme lords, per Benny Johnson. We love to hear it. I hope you guys will be there at the Student Action Summit in July. Don't forget, you can use code Isabel for a discount on your registration. We have a fun block to share with you now. That's a new segment we've really never done before, covering some really feel-good stories from across the United States. I think we need more of these because the media, as we know, just covers horrible, sad things all the time that causes us a lot of burnout, and you, the viewer, I'm sure, as well. So first things first, we really want to share just a story of American excellence and perseverance in the face of unspeakable tragedy and evil. I don't know if you guys have ever read the book or seen the movie Unbroken. Maybe, yes, maybe.
No, I haven't.
Never?
Tell me all about it.
Connor, oh my gosh, it's so good. So this is actually a real story of someone in the United States who really came to fruition in the 1940s, Louis Zamperini. I don't know if you guys have heard of him before. He actually ran in the Olympics with Jesse Owens on the United States track team, was a very stellar track athlete, widely regarded at the top of his field, but actually ended up fighting in World War II, as many young men did during the time. And in April 1943, during a bombing mission against the Japanese-held island of Nauru, he was flying an airplane when it was damaged in combat, and he was actually taken prisoner of war from the Japanese in the 1940s in World War II. This book and the movie that covers the story of the book of his life is absolutely harrowing, what he had to go through as a prisoner of war and just what the capability of the human spirit is. And I think what he really shows the world is this concept of American grit in the face of unspeakable confrontation and tragedy and just situations that you could never have previously imagined, and his willingness to never give up. I love this book. It is absolutely one of my favorites that I've ever read. You should absolutely watch the movie. But do you think that masculinity really even remotely looks like this in modern America, and how can we get it back? Connor, I'll start with you.
Well, yeah, I just noticed that you didn't include his gender pronouns whenever you were
Shocking.
giving the rundown there.
His gender pronouns.
Yeah, excuse me, sorry. I guess I'm a bigot. No, I don't think that kind of masculinity exists. I don't think that we would be able to storm the beaches of Normandy anymore. And you look at the people who are running our military these days, you've got Rachel Levine, who's a man, and then you've got Mark Milley, who's fat, and then you've got Lloyd Austin, who's just stupid. So it's like we couldn't even put together the logistical operations, much less have the soldiers who are willing to actually fight for a country that has, you know, good Western values, because I don't think we have those anymore. I know this was supposed to be uplifting and light. I'm sorry.
Well, it is.
I'm not
I
good at
actually
that.
have hope. I really do, because I think stories like this do remind us of the capability of the human spirit. And that is ultimately, when we're put to the test, the best parts of us shine through more often than not, I believe. But yeah, it is an interesting concept to line up true masculine heroes of the past versus who we have today.
Especially when you look at countries like China that are revamping their nuclear system. It's not encouraging to think about the lack of masculinity that we have on our end. Same thing when you look at the German army recruitment video and the American army recruitment video. I mean, it's nowhere to be found, it seems like. So it's alarming, but it makes you appreciate these stories that much more.
I don't think it even has a lot to do with masculinity. I think it has a lot to do about grit and individual contribution to your own country and standing up for something that's of value. Because if you look at a lot of the polling right now, most Democrats would flee the country if Russia invaded.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're looking at. It's not really anything to do with masculinity. That's male, female.
Yeah.
And I think we live off this almost historical arrogance of the 40s and 50s where people did stand up to evil. And it's almost like they paid the bill for us and we don't have to do it again. But I think most of us, I think people in this room would. I think a lot of people in the country simply wouldn't stand up for what's right, regardless of what gender they are.
Right. Well, the definition of what's evil and what's right and what's good and just and what's bad and wrong and immoral is constantly shifting because the left has waged war on objectivity, right?
Right.
So I think back in the 40s, we could say objectively that what was happening in Nazi Germany was objectively evil, obviously, right? But now we can't even agree what a man and what a woman is here in the United States. So how could we possibly agree on something as big and as important as going to war and sending people off to die? I don't think that we really can.
I agree with that, and I think this is a really interesting parallel to what we're going through right now with potentially the verge of World War III. I just talked to my parents about this the other day, and they said, oh, well, history repeats itself, and your generation doesn't remember, but during the last world wars in Vietnam and everything that was so big and overwhelming and really felt like the end of the world, our country all came together because we had a common enemy. I don't even think we have a common enemy anymore because you're absolutely right. People just would leave. I think that there would be thousands upon thousands, if not millions of people in this country who would openly applaud a Russian invasion or a Chinese invasion of the United States because they say, wonderful, great, death to Western values and death to America.
There's also some history rewriting there, though, because even in the 40s, we like to look back as everyone standing up to evil. People knew what Nazi Germany were doing for a long time.
And they didn't do
The United
anything.
States didn't even enter the war until Japan attacked them.
Correct. Right.
So are we going to stand up against China? We did stand up against Russia. I'm not even saying we should, but we've got to accept that China is so integral to our economic survival, too. They'd rather live off our money and then make little changes, maybe taking over Taiwan, knowing someone like Biden won't do anything about it. I don't think we're going to get attacked like we were in Pearl Harbor, for example, that was the catalyst for the United States involvement in the first place.
Yeah. It was interesting looking back at, Winston Churchill's constant plea to get the United States involved in World War II, and we just kind of threw the cold shoulder for a while. So interesting perspective.
Showed up,
from
though.
a
It helped
Brit.
out. Thanks
we
for
did
that.
show
Thanks
up.
for eventually
You're
coming.
welcome. Glad we're not
Couple of
speaking
years late,
German
but it
all
worked
together
out.
today. No, I love that. And I do think that this book and movie are just a really powerful reminder of the capacity we do have to stand up for what is good and what is actually there for the human spirit if we're willing to courageously go after it. So if you haven't checked out the book and movie Unbroken, please do. Louis Zamperini is a national treasure, and sadly far too little people know about his amazing story. All right, we've got another fun one for you guys today. A homeless dog has found a home with the United States Army to comfort soldiers. So we are talking about a dog named Duke today. Very sweet dog name. There's Duke. Isn't he sweet? They found Duke abroad. They found him overseas, and he was bringing comfort to U.S. soldiers, and now they're bringing him back to the United States to live with one of these soldiers. When soldiers first found him, he had been shot and was wounded really severely, but he was healed by the Army. This is him after his recovery, which we love. He's so happy. Oh, so sweet. And now he gets to make an entire career out of comforting soldiers that have faced combat overseas. Don't we love that?
That's possum.
It is possum, Connor. Oh my gosh, we don't deserve dogs.
Sometimes I used to get really frustrated. I love animals, so I used to get frustrated that men would force animals to fight their battles and take dogs to war and whatnot. But there's some really good boys out there, and they fight really hard.
And girls.
And yeah, there's some girls
Very
too.
progressive of you, Connor.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm so sorry, dogs. I'm misgendering all the fighters out there. But it's awesome to see something like that. Like dogs, they can heal wounds, emotional and physical. So it's just great.
Hot take: I think dogs are angels disguised as dogs given to us
That's
by
not
God.
Americans and dogs. It's not a hot take.
We love it. We love
love
it.
dogs
The
over
Brits
here.
don't love the dogs as much.
We don't love
Ian.
many things.
Yeah, just coffee.
Well, that's pretty accurate. We love that. All right, last thing I want to talk about is Tiger Woods playing in the Masters this last weekend. I'm actually really surprised he was able to play as well as he did. He didn't have his best game, obviously, by far, but 10 months ago, he was still in the hospital with both his tibia and fibula completely destroyed. Rods and screws were put into his leg. His life was almost taken in this life-threatening car accident. 11 months later, he's competing in the Masters, obviously, and everybody's talking about maybe it's the greatest golf comeback, if not sports comeback ever. What are our takes?
Well, I mean, this isn't the first time that Tiger's made an astounding and impressive comeback either. He had a personal dramas a handful of years ago, and then people said, oh, he's never going to play again. Then he played again. Then he won a lot of tournaments, and now he's back. I think Tiger is a really good example of that American grit that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's just about having the willpower to push your body far enough and push your mind far enough to actually accomplish and achieve something. So good for Tiger. He played actually pretty well. I mean, if you watched him, and it was hard not to because the media and the folks who were covering the Masters were obsessed with him the whole time, as they should be. He played really pretty well. Wasn't the best game, or the best round, but I was impressed.
Yeah. Sweet.
Good for him.
We love it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I love athletics and sports in general, so I'm able to separate, personal drama from somebody's athletic career, and he's had a stunning one, and no one will ever touch his career. I don't think even his son, who's getting up there. I mean,
Charlie's great.
You watch that boy play, and he's going to be just like his dad, and that's awesome. And so, I mean, yeah, I kind of get tired of people who just recycle the same athletes who just keep coming back. But I think he's earned his place, and I think he's done well. And considering golf is a pretty boring sport, I think it added some nice
watch your mouth.
spice. Hey.
I hate golf.
hate it.
This segment is a waste of time. I think golf is so boring.
Yeah.
It's just glorified mini golf which children can play. I don't get it. Joe Morgan, my friend
We
over the
love
Daily
it.
Wire, is going to hate me. Worst sport in the world.
Worst sport in the world.
Barely a sport.
Worse than women's basketball?
Golf is
That's not a
golf is
sport.
the most
That's a hobby.
golf is the most difficult sport
It is. I'll give you
in
that.
the entire sport lexicon.
I agree, but I
Hot
still
take.
think
It
it's
being
boring.
difficult
Ooh.
doesn't make it not boring.
I think that
I'm with
makes
you.
it compelling,
I'm with you.
frankly. I mean, it takes so much body control and mental,
It takes body control to watch
knowledge. I guess.
Golf was the only sport I ever quit. It was the only sport I ever quit because I
didn't
could
know
not.
you tried golf.
Lily
I did. I've
Stanley's
tried
a
everything.
quitter.
I did. I will admit,
preemptively
against
quit.
my dad's better judgment.
Same.
But I couldn't get good at it fast enough because it's a lifelong sport that you can constantly improve on. And
Which
I
is
had
why
zero
it's so
patience.
beautiful.
And so I took up something harder, which was pole vaulting and that.
Pole vaulting is not harder than
I
golf.
have pole vaulted in high school. My extent to golf is top golf and a few rounds of mini golf.
That's pretty
so
fun.
That's
Top golf is fun.
my entire experience with the sport. We have a couple more minutes left in the segment, but I think we're going to reserve them for the next one because it's a very spicy topic that I'm sure we want all the time to talk about as possible. So we will be right back after this message from our friends at Patriot Mobile.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now, more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies who fight for our rights and our beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to our causes, and with your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We've got Lily, Ian, Connor, and your girl, Isabel. I wish John was here, but he's getting a tan on the beach at his friend's wedding in Maui. So
I don't think he's
ripped.
Said with no
I don't
jealousy
think he's-
whatsoever.
I don't think he's jealous that we are here instead of him, but he will be back this week. So thank you so much for sticking with us. In the meantime, we got a very spicy, hot topic to share with you next. Our thoughts on TikTok and its impact on America. Before we go into everything we want to talk about, I just want baseline opinions from everyone, what your experience with TikTok has been like, and if you are pro-TikTok or anti-TikTok. We're saving you for the end, Connor. Lily, let's go.
I'll keep it short. I resent TikTok, like big TikTok and what it's done and yada yada, but as a user, I enjoy it. I find the fitness aspect to it. You can really tailor your For You page pretty well, and it has worked wonders for me as an athlete, being able to make my own workouts and all this stuff. I overall love it. 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10.
Oh, that's
all
high.
right, that is high.
I think with TikTok, I don't mind it as a platform. I think it's like a lot of others. It's just very addictive.
Yeah, it's hugely addictive.
If you let your children use it, I think that's a parent's decision. I hate the fact that China is so involved and we're basically handing our data over to them. That's what worries me. If it was a purely American company with no connections, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all.
I know they were working on that towards the end of Trump's presidency, and then obviously we had
Some other guy
things
came
to
in,
worry
it all fell
about.
apart.
So I'm sure that that's not on the priority list these days. But I would be curious if that was something we would return to. All right, big guy, let's hear it.
No, look, TikTok is inherently an evil app, and given the fact that it's run by China and managed by China, they're using it to make America a dumber country, a more hypersexualized country, which is integral to the degradation of the Western family, and it really, frankly, should be banned. I mean, the government should have the ability to legislate things that will make society a more fruitful, healthier, happier, and better place. Given their falling objective standards, which I don't know if the Biden regime would be able to do. But TikTok is terrible. And I think that we here at this office, and Charlie I know, kind of actively worked to lobby the president in a lot of ways to get it banned. We were upset to see that didn't kind of go through. With the second term, then maybe it will. But yeah, TikTok's terrible, and you should not be on it. And it's not even just the data, which is really troubling in and of itself. It's that you're right, it is addicting. And the more time that we spend on TikTok, the less time that we're spending on doing, good, fruitful things like, I don't know, enjoying time with your family or reading a book or, I don't know, playing golf.
Here we go on golf again. All right, here's my 2 cents on the matter. I have a very extreme love-hate relationship with TikTok. Many of my videos have been taken down for hate speech, for example, one that had almost 5 million views last week that got my entire account deleted about how men can't have periods. Apparently that's hate speech in modern America today. Shocking, offensive. I know.
Good.
I've had my account permanently deleted and then reinstated after an appeal twice. So I have a really extreme love-hate relationship with the platform. That being said, the way I view any social media platform, TikTok, Instagram, you name it, anything across the board, it's a tool. And it's a tool that can either be used for very good things or very, very bad things. And I think with TikTok, it's interesting because you see both ends of the spectrum pretty substantially, not so much the in-between content that so many people are interacting with every day, but the things that give it a really, really bad rap and the things that give it a really, really good rap. The way the TikTok algorithm works is really shocking, but is honestly the future of social media. And the Wall Street Journal did a really interesting project on this, 6 months ago now, maybe almost a year ago, where they made a bunch of fake platforms, fake users, and gave them a whole identity and backstory and brought them onto this platform, not actually people, but people that they had invented. And they tried to see how long it would take the algorithm to figure these people out, to suggest content that had to do with their interests, their age, maybe where they were from geographically. And I believe the average was like 15 minutes. Within 15 minutes of being brand new on the platform, it automatically knew to suggest fitness videos for somebody that was really into fitness, to suggest food videos at restaurants.
It's remarkable.
Crazy. Yeah. They did a really cool YouTube video covering the whole experience of what they did. But you're starting to see the influence of TikTok on social media platforms other than TikTok really substantially in 2022. Instagram is pushing Reels content more than any other content available on its platform. Facebook is offering Reels now. YouTube has YouTube Shorts. Even Getter, a new player to the scene, has Getter Vision, which is their version of TikTok. And so I think it speaks volumes to how effective it is to get people's attention and start really necessary conversations. TikTok has over 1 billion users across the entire planet. 150 million of those users are here in the United States as monthly active users, mostly millennials and Gen Zers. And so my perspective on the matter is, if that's where all the people are, and if that is where culture is, then conservative creators have an obligation, not even conservative, but people who create content based on the truth, have an obligation to be there and to create content that actually tells the truth in this world that is removing objectivity.
I totally agree with that take. I mean, I don't like the data part, I don't like the China part, I don't like any of that, but user friendliness and the algorithm and the purity of how people are able to rise and build a platform and you're able to make a lot of money off of it, I actually like it better than any other app.
Really?
Yes. And Connor, it's interesting that you mentioned, it's an abomination and whatnot, because it can, like every other platform is used for evil in the same way. So, if we're going to ban TikTok, we might as well ban all of them, because just as much gross content happens on Instagram and Twitter and whatnot. So you'd have to be consistent in all of that and wipe them all off, because I think there is a lot of good.
Better society.
You're probably right. I mean, overall, I disagree. I hate technology. I hate social media in general. Like, if we could go back, hit the reset, none of the social stuff, I think ultimately that would be better for a more fruitful society. But I think, as you've mentioned, it's here. It is the reality of it. We can't fight the culture war without it, unfortunately.
No, you can.
So how do you fight the culture war without it?
By not giving your data to China.
But they
okay, but China makes our phones
those are two different
in
conversations.
China. First of all, yeah, and I agree with that, Ian. Those are two completely different conversations.
Yeah, but
China has your data, period. Our phones are made in China. Every other software
They've got
company
it.
sells their data to China. Like, let's just acknowledge that. And that's a separate conversation in and of itself. Remove that part of the conversation with Chinese data. From a purely fruitful moral society argument, like you were making before, how do you win over the next generation who's not exposed to these ideas by not going where they are?
Well, first of all, like I said, I don't think that the next generation should be on there. So that's step one, is you just remove TikTok from the conversation. Right?
Well, so you mean all of them? You'd have to remove all
No.
socials.
I mean TikTok. Let's start with the one that's Chinese owned and operated, right? I think that seems logical. No, I mean they're our greatest enemy. They are doing all the evil things that we just talked about a couple minutes ago, and we're just going to let them rig the algorithm to make America a worse place and say, oh, we just got to take it. I'm so sick of conservatives sitting back and doing this kind of hospice care mentality where it's like, oh, we're just going to passively allow the decline of Western civilization to take place.
No, we're not saying that. We're saying actively go into the fire and create content that's the opposite
and then
of
get
that.
banned, and then your content will, ultimately end up getting
going,
removed.
and there's a lot of conservative reach on there, and ideas are very popular. Conservative ideas are popular, so when you're able to infiltrate those spaces and spread them, they catch like wildfire, and that's why we end up getting banned so quickly. But you just make a new account and keep going.
It's like Don Quixote, tilting at windmills. Basically, you're just kind of going at something that has no real end game, because at the end of the day, it's an effort in futility.
I disagree.
I think there are two different conversations here, though. The first is that why we should ban TikTok, because you're right. If we're going to ban all social media for the reason that it's destroying society, but I think banning TikTok because it's Chinese backed is the way to go if we want to just focus on TikTok.
Sure. Yes,
maybe not ban all social media.
Not all tech is the same. Like when we say
Right.
big tech, Twitter is not Facebook, is not the same as TikTok.
Yeah, exactly.
But then we've also got to stop blaming big tech for the problems in our society. Big tech is a symptom of our society.
Correct.
Handing a baby an iPad is the problem.
100%.
It's the fact that children are growing
100%.
up learning the kind of garbage we're going to speak about later in schools.
Yes.
I think we blame big tech. Some elements of big tech introduce these ideas. A lot of it is just responding to what people already want.
Yeah.
And we're blaming big tech for parents basically being lazy and
Totally.
letting
1000%.
children educate each other. And then there are some perverts out there, either ideological perverts or actual physical perverts who want access to children in terms of ideas. And then we're just handing them off to them because ultimately parents are too lazy. And so I think, rather arguing over whether or not we should ban big tech, we should be asking why is big tech so popular?
I agree.
Interesting.
That's very
And
good.
in my opinion, how do I use that, because it is so popular, to maybe change people's minds on the subject entirely, maybe even walk away from the importance of social media in your own life? So many different conservative companies and platforms and organizations have different strategies with this. The Daily Wire has 2 million followers on TikTok. I'm curious, with your guys' podcast that you use, how often are you interacting with the social team? Is TikTok a part of your experience there?
I don't know too much about the TikTok side. I know that's something that's very new. My concern with TikTok, just as an objective conservative, is that they are being very, very careful with the kind of rules they're they're enforcing. So their community guidelines, conservatives do get thrown off, but not as much. You can make a lot of money on TikTok. There's a reason. It's because they're trying to grow a base. The moment they have that base, then they'll start cranking out the rules like everyone else.
Interesting.
And so I think sometimes conservatives need to look at a platform and really ask the hard questions, which is, this is China-backed. They are our biggest enemy on the world stage. Do we want to be aligning with them? Because we are handing them a lot of money, a lot of data. And that's what worries me more than the platform itself, because my worries about TikTok are the same as really about Instagram.
I agree.
Same, I agree with that. And Congress did a really interesting hearing, I think it was with the Judiciary Committee a couple of months ago, about TikTok specifically, but just generally social media algorithms with teenagers, and the fact that it is pretty substantially contributing to mental health crises and eating disorders and suicidation and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I think if we're going to talk about banning social media, which I personally am not in favor of, what would be our reasoning for that, and what would be our justification for that? Just playing total devil's advocate curiosity.
Let me just be clear real quick. I don't think that we necessarily, as a realistic policy measure, should ban all social media, but we should definitely ban the ones that are owned by China, so that takes TikTok off the list. But then we should hyper-regulate the rest of social media. If it's an American company, then just regulate the crap out of it, right? We need a small but strong government, one that's willing to actually fight for values that matter to the West. And So banning all social media, it's kind of a pipe dream. You're not going to do it. It would cause revolutions in the street, which is terrifying that we would revolt over that. But nevertheless, yeah, we just need to make social media a better place for kids to use. If they're going to use it, you're right. If you look at TikTok, they are, there's I think it was Wall Street Journal as well. Kids are developing tics, not like TikTok tick, but like tics. Like because they get fed these videos of people that have Tourette's, I guess, and then all of a sudden they like pick up on them themselves because they're spending so much time on it, and then they go to the pharmaceutical or they go to their doctors who prescribe them medication for their tics, which aren't really real. You know, they're just
crazy.
Emulating what they're seeing.
Crazy.
And so you get kids hooked on pills, and then Big Pharma gets richer, and it's like, who is this benefiting?
We actually have one of those videos about Tourette's, so let's go ahead and play that right now.
So a couple of months back, I was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome, and I wanted to do one of those cup stacking things.
It shouldn't be that hard, right? Relax.
It was way harder than I thought.
Piss in his cup. I produce way too much spit, honestly.
So that's one video that went pretty viral on the platform. There's another user who I think is like a teenage girl sharing her experience with Tourette's, and all of her videos are like this. She's hugely viral.
And I don't mind
on
the
TikTok.
education around it. Like, I don't mind people understanding, like, this is a real thing that people go through. This is what it looks like. This is how to, you know, be friendly with your friends who have Tourette's, etc.
But yeah, allegedly, some of these reports are coming out now that some users now are faking having it after have been exposed to these disorders on TikTok. This isn't limited to Tourette's either. This is like dissociative identity disorder, like
eating
anxiety,
disorders, transgenderism. I mean, it's all of it.
Issue.
It's the yin and the yang to having such a free and open platform. And that's where I think the conversation, Connor, needs to come back a little bit more to the personal responsibility of all of it. I think these tools are set up in a nice way, and then it's humans that just completely crap all over it and make it terrible and infiltrate it with all this terrible content. And there needs to be more of an emphasis on either regulating the content, and who's going to get the say, and what is and isn't good is going to be very difficult considering the left has no form of objective standards.
Correct.
But if we were able to do that as conservatives, we'd be able to get somewhere. But yeah, that's a real weird, bizarre problem. But I think it's the same with all these things. You know, the transgenderism, gay, lesbian
I think it's
stuff.
especially true of the transgender issue, and that is actually the one subject that TikTok will immediately deplatform you over. I mentioned that one video about men can't have periods. Every single video of mine that has ever been flagged for hate speech was either poking fun at or talking about the trans issue in America.
I think ultimately the agenda is to dismantle Western society. I'm sure that is what is.
So let's keep using the app.
No, I don't. I mean, but I think that's the same agenda as Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of it. I mean, so you have to be.
Yeah, but we have dominion over the people who run Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Do we?
We just
Do
have
we
them
though?
letting us to
Again,
Honestly,
it's mirroring the society we're in.
Yeah.
Facebook are only doing this because they want to make money. All these companies are for-profit companies.
Yeah.
They're just mirroring the culture
very
we've
telling.
allowed to be created.
I agree.
We lived in a culture that laughed at the idea that a man can become a woman. Facebook wouldn't care. They're
Correct.
only mirroring the world we've
agree
created.
with that.
Yeah, but
it goes back to personal
I'm
responsibility.
just saying, we can regulate Zuckerberg, and we can regulate Twitter, and we can regulate all these other places. Like,
But we never will, is the
don't.
problem,
Well, I mean,
because
we
Zuckerberg
don't. As
Zuckerberg
conservatives-
and Twitter
as
and
Separate
conservatives,
our
should we?
elections.
Yeah.
I mean,
Literally.
they're literally in
And we've
every
had
aspect of
how
our
many
society.
opportunities to regulate these things, to
Well, no,
remove
you're
Section
right.
230, to amend it even. All the people in power, spoiler alert, are all being funded by the same people. And so I don't know, when we talk about having dominion over these people or regulatory authority over these people, the reality of our society is that the people in power, whether they're public servants or private business owners or CEOs of these major companies, they generally are working together. There are a few exceptions, obviously, but it's really alarming to think about it that way. And so I think, to flip the conversation a little bit, you have to go back to what can I do as an individual? What can I do as an American citizen, as a creator, as somebody who hosts a podcast or creates videos or has conversations like this on TPUSA Live? What's the best way for you to make the biggest impact possible? And I think that's using these tools that are available to you to get the message out there far and wide as much as possible. Because otherwise you're waiting on people who are never going to act on these subjects.
It's using those tools, like the certain tools and not others. But I think it's also understanding what problems can actually be solved. Like we're talking about legislating big tech. That's a phenomenally difficult problem. It's very easy to say we should legislate these things away, but you get into very sticky situations when you have conservatives saying we should legislate certain ideas over others. And I think that's quite antithetical to some of the things many of us believe. But as I agree with you 100% in that if we focus on these issues on an individual level, on a community level, and also on a cultural level, in that we're trying to change the ideas, not force them through. Because if we're forcing ideology through big tech, one, that's going to be difficult because they're all on the left anyway. But two, does that really achieve what we want? We're just trying to push propaganda in a different way rather than solving the problem.
Like an actual healthy society who desires good content.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the real problem.
Yeah, you know, I really like that, and this is what we'll wrap up with today, is that when I was a kid, you know, we talk a lot about indoctrination and how we're only exposing kids to one idea, which is why that's all they know by the time they become an adult. And there's a lot of conservatives that are now coming forward and saying, well, we should just do the same thing. We should just indoctrinate kids, or we should put out our own propaganda because propaganda is really successful. I don't think that's the answer, and I don't think that's the pathway conservatives should be taking. When I was growing up, my parents did their absolute best to expose their children at a very young age to every aspect of every argument possible, to say, this is what your dad and I believe as conservatives or as Christians or whatever. Here's what other people believe, but hey, here's all of the information. Understand it.
It's the third part that's the important part.
Exactly, yeah. Think about the 360 degrees of that, and then when you know the truth, because it's there, go lead your life in accordance with that once you've decided, you know, that that is the truth and everything else is not. And I love that I was raised that way because it forced me to think about things from a different perspective and understand why people fall for the propaganda and why people fall for the indoctrination. It is very enticing and it's very effective. But if we can give people the freedom, which we love as conservatives, to understand this is true and this is not, and understand the 360-degree perspective of all these issues, that's how we can create an educated and moral society moving forward. So
we should just be mindful that whenever we use the word conservative, that it has a deeper meaning than just the neoliberal right? So if we're going to talk about being conservatives, then we should actively try to conserve something, right? And so to replace this idea of, like I said, a small but strong government with one that values, you know, this liberty and whatever you want to call it, all too often liberty is replaced by licentiousness, and an immoral society governed by people who are feigning morals in the name of, you know, freedom, whatever the hell that means, will ultimately crumble. So we should be conservatives, not right-wing liberals, and actually say that we're willing to put up these fights, you know, push our ideas because they are good ideas and they're better ideas, and do it by whatever means that we need to, because we're trying to stop something and conserve something. We're not just trying to let it go and let people make their own kind of like decisions whenever they're influenced by these very, very evil tech overlords, right? We have to have guardrails in society, and if conservatives aren't willing to put those up, or if the right isn't willing to put those up, then they shouldn't call themselves conservatives because they're not conserving anything.
Interesting.
So.
Well, lots of hot takes in this conversation. We love it. Definitely took up a lot of your time talking about TikTok today on TPUSA Live. We are going to hear about a very special event we have for our young women right now, and then we will be back talking about crazy indoctrination in schools. See you in a second.
And I hope you're filled with courage and conviction, clarity, and a little bit of wisdom. Know that we at Turning Point USA, we have your back.
Welcome back to TPUSA Live. We've got a star-studded panel with us, Connor, Lily, Ian, and the craziest teachers on planet Earth, which is what we're going to be talking about right now. There is a first-grade teacher in Boston who has gone viral all over the internet this week who did a Zoom call with kindergarteners, first graders, and second graders called an identity share call, where he openly speaks about being trans. We have the video to share with you. Let's take a look.
And something cool about me, Miss Hammond? All right, so something that's really cool and unique about who I am is that I am transgender. And until I was 18 years old, everyone thought I was a girl. And this was super, super uncomfortable for me because I knew that wasn't right. The way I like to describe it is like wearing a super itchy sweater. The longer you wear it, the itchier it gets, and the only way to make the itching stop is to have everyone see and know the person that you really are. So when I was 18, I told my family and my friends that I'm really a boy.
Okay. Speechless.
I can't believe that we've equated, you know, destroying your biological God-given gender with an itchy sweater. You can take off a sweater. I can take off all my clothes right now, but I'm not going to do that. I'll spare you. But changing something that God created is much more consequential.
Yeah.
And
That's just terrible.
It's a symptom of a mental illness. And if you are a deeply disturbed, mentally ill person who's probably also a sexual deviant, you shouldn't be teaching children.
Also, the narcissism involved.
The sheer narcissism.
To have to
That's a great
believe,
point.
like, to believe that this is something you should share with children. I don't
Kindergartners. This isn't just children. Yeah, these kids
kindergartners
are
who
like
can't
4
even
and 5.
understand this issue.
my
Like, you have to
gosh.
be a pure narcissist to think this is even an appropriate thing to share about yourself.
It's an attack. I mean, that's why I find it so bizarre that there's such an influx of these transgender or whatever identifying teachers. It's a coordinated attack against children. That's the only, I mean, you've got a zillion professions. Why is this the one that you choose? And then to go spew all that stuff to them? Why? You're attacking them. You're attacking their innocence, hoping to pervert them so that they can do whatever in the world they're doing. It's just
Well, they're also
terrible.
trying to justify their own life. Like a lot of these people,
They're looking for the
yes,
validation.
they are seeking validation from the people whose minds they are molding, which
Totally.
is very, very dangerous.
So this teacher goes on to say, when babies are born, the doctor looks and makes a guess on whether the baby is a boy or
It's a hell
girl.
of a 50-50 guess. Huh?
Sometimes the doctor
gosh.
is wrong. If they are right, the baby is cisgender.
See, and this is why I really appreciated Charlie's conversation with Buck Angel, because Buck Angel, who is a transgender porn star, whatever, was able to validate the fact that there is no such thing as like being born in the wrong body. Like you're born and then you have a mental disorder, that it's a mental problem. Like that person saying that like the doctor was wrong and that I'm not really a girl, that's absolute insanity. That's not the case. It's a mental disorder. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain. Your physical, biological sex is what it is, and you should work through those other issues with somebody who's qualified to do that.
And we flipped the script. I feel like when we were growing up, there were very few, but there were a few conversations about being trans, and it used to be like, oh, well, that person has a mental disorder, a psychological disorder where they feel like they're in the wrong body. Now it's the doctor told me I was in the wrong body and my parents told me I was in the wrong body. All of a sudden it's on somebody else, which I find super interesting.
Well, it's an expansion of a mental disorder to society. It's rather than someone being acknowledged they have something wrong with them in some form, and then us as a society trying to help them. I think all of these people deserve sympathy. They're going through something awful. I don't think we should just cast them aside. But it's the fact that as a society we're embracing other people's delusions. It's incredibly dangerous.
Oh, and then
We're
they're
just
forcing
setting
your
those-
language.
Yes.
And then they force your language over it. So now those little children are going to be reprimanded if they don't refer to that person properly. And that's a real problem.
Also, when you're 5, who cares about any of this stuff?
They
Even
don't.
sex education when you're
unless
5.
people
is
tell
so
you
confusing.
to, unless an adult tells you to.
So confusing.
They are not the only young kids who are going to be exposed to this. As we all know, New Jersey announced last week, now they're doubling down on the fact that starting in the fall, second graders are going to receive mandatory gender identity training, including part of the curriculum talking about how boy parts and girl parts aren't even really a thing. Sometimes doctors will tell you you have boy parts, but really you're a girl. And sometimes doctors will tell you you have girl parts and you're really a boy. Obviously, this comes on the heels of Florida and now a dozen other states that are introducing parental rights and education bills. How many states do we think are going to go in this direction now, Connor, where it's all of a sudden they're going the full opposite of like, yes, we are teaching second graders about sex?
I don't know the answer to that question, honestly, but here's the thing. Look, if you're going to teach the gay agenda, if you're going to teach the history of the LGBTQ movement, maybe you should start at the beginning and start with Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's where the curriculum should begin, and let the kids know that, you know, this has a long, deep-seated history,
It's not new.
and it's not good for you.
Yeah.
There's people up there who don't really like it. Talking about God, he'll strike you down.
I just am. Go ahead.
So, really quickly, I also think we are engaging in the left's entire rhetoric here by accepting the LGBT notion of there are gay people in the United States who have faced real persecution, but it is who you are attracted to is not like saying I am this when you are
I don't know why
scientifically
we've
aware.
made that the
Sexuality
same
become
thing.
our identity.
And so
That's
we've
really
accepted
weird.
these groups as the same, and so then it's very easy to point to actual gay people who have faced persecution to hide behind that as a shield when we say, no, you're a man if you say you're a woman. And I think as conservatives, we need to be focusing on this very, very clear difference there before we even talk about any of these moral issues.
Well, not to mention now, there's a new letter, a couple letters on this acronym. Minor attracted people are
Right,
now
well, that's
a thing.
always been the point.
Apparently.
That-
and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm sorry. What on earth does being a pedophile or being trans have to do with being gay or being lesbian?
Because sexual immorality is a slippery slope. There's just one point to when it's completely immoral, and after that, it's all immoral.
I actually disagree. I think there's a big difference between consenting adults who happen to be homosexual and then trying to invent identities to either make yourself a minority, because that's also a desperation to be a minority here.
That's fair.
And so I think it's obviously bad for that. I've spoken to some gay conservatives who are devastated at the fact that their movement they've been pushing for a long time has basically been hijacked by a bunch of certifiably insane people who just want to tell children there's no such thing as sex.
Yeah, I'm surprised that there are not conservatives rioting in the streets over this stuff. I mean, when it comes to children and sexuality, this is the hill, in my opinion. I don't care about the foreign stuff. I don't care about whatever, food shortages. Children and sexuality is the hill that I will die on. And that's the one that conservatives need to be in the streets screaming
There are
about.
some, actually. There's lots of protests happening outside of Disneyland and Disney World this week. There are a lot of people taking this to the public eye to make sure we're talking about this. These are not the only states talking about sex with kids. Rhode Island, in a private school, is encouraging students to become LGBTQ advocates. Rhode Island is encouraging students to write letters to their politicians expressing opposition to what the administrators called their state's version of the Florida Don't Say Gay bill. So obviously the state legislature is introducing that. This was the lesson plan provided to students. It says Florida is not the only state proposing a Don't Say Gay bill, and this private school is encouraging their students to write to the state legislature. Maryland is also talking about some crazy stuff. One school board in particular is putting in a policy that prioritizes race in community engagement standards and the board's decision-making process of admissions of schools. Good. So all of a sudden, affirmative action is on steroids now in the United States, and this is obviously the consequence of some of that critical race theory as well. I really think you're right, Lily. This is the hill to die on. So I'm curious, just really quick in the about minute and a half we have remaining, what can you all say as words of encouragement to parents, to grandparents who may be watching this, people who have no idea how to handle this when it comes to their own kids?
Something that we say on the Charlie Kirk Show all the time is that you have to be willing to be the same person in public that you are in private, right?
Amen.
So if you're sitting around your dinner table saying, man, this thing where people are putting kids in dresses and being transgender and pedophiles, that's really weird and we shouldn't allow that. Don't just leave that conversation inside your home. Be bold enough to say it out in the streets, say it to your legislators, say it to your school board members, say it to your kids, and say it to anyone who will listen, frankly. Don't be worried about being called a homophobe or anything like that, because at the end of the day, you're standing up for what you know is right. So be bold, be courageous, and go fight the fight that God calls you to fight.
Love it. Ian?
So I think a lot of this is, in a really dark way, actually a good thing for conservatives, because they have turned parents into a voting bloc, which they really never were.
Right.
And we've seen this in Florida. Like Ron DeSantis and his bill is incredibly popular, and they are basically turning parents against the entire left.
Right.
And so I think we as conservatives need to make sure we politically profit on that.
Yep.
That's really what can be done, is how we change these things, is putting people who stand up for basic truth.
Lily, final few seconds.
I think this starts at the most intimate level. I've had a lot of neighbors, a lot of people I've met lately who are struggling with this with their children because of their hyperactive social media children. And so I think parents need to be comfortable with speaking the truth. They need to dig into truth so that they can own it and communicate it enough to their children to protect them.
Truth is so important, and our friends at Freedom Square agree. Let's check out this message before we come back for an interview for One Last Thing.
All right, guys, you have signed up, right? You've joined freedomsquare.com. If you haven't, why not? This should have happened a decade ago. How did somebody...
Yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
Abortion, I salute you! Women, if you need an abortion, get one!
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to the next generation. Activate freedom. Join Patriot Mobile.
We are back for One Last Thing with TPUSA Live, trying to connect to our guest for an interview, but in the meantime, I want to keep talking about everything we were just covering in the previous segment. We were talking about how people in our own lives are facing this all the time. I have neighbors in my hometown where I grew up talking about how their 11-year-old has trans classmates now, apparently. I have family friends in California who've actually pulled their kids out of their public school because they just absolutely can't deal with this anymore. Their district was the one that had the biologically male, non-binary teacher sleep at sleepaway camp in the girls' bunk for the science camp or whatever outdoor education thing they had to go on. once they pulled their kids from the school district. But it's shocking. And I love seeing parents start to rise up against this stuff. It's the reason we're seeing homeschooling rates start to go through the roof.
Well, what sucks is if these parents would have been paying attention to their child's lives this whole time, a lot of this stuff could have been stopped. This is a lack of parenting that we're seeing manifest. When you're not deeply involved in your child's life and you're allowing them for 5 days a week, 8 hours a day to sit with strangers, you hardly know those people. You go to 1 or 2 parent-teacher conference a year. You don't know who's teaching your kids.
Isn't that an interesting thought? Like, that was normal, though. That was so
It
normal
wasn't,
when
because
we
this
were
wasn't
growing
stuff
up.
we had to worry about, because this was such an outlandish idea, like instituting sex ed to kindergartners.
Do you remember your first sex ed class?
Oh, it was awful.
It was
So
awful.
awful.
It was awful.
I think it was in
But it was
7th or
clean.
8th grade for me, and we separated the boys and the girls. And I remember my mom threw an absolute fit because my private school that I was going to school at was going to show the girls a full live birth video. And she was like, I am a adult woman who's had 3 kids, and I've never seen a video of a live birth. No, you're not showing that to my child. So she marched in the principal's office with a couple other parents, and they said, no, you're not showing this to our kids.
I had to get a paper signed. It was they gave out and they said, this is what we're going to teach. They gave them the curriculum. Well, here's what it is. You can sign it or you can opt out, and this is what it is.
But now it's not the sex ed we knew. It's like very extreme.
It's anal fisting for kindergartners.
Well, it's
in
not
California.
biological anymore. It's completely ideological.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Yeah, separating boys from girls wouldn't even be a practice anymore, because what's a boy and what's a girl, right?
We don't know.
can't agree on the
That's
most
a great
fundamental
point.
things. I'll say one thing to your point, because I think it's really smart again. The right, the traditional kind of right-wing party in America here, we have to be willing to embrace the new responsibility that we have to be the parents' party, right?
Yes.
The thing is I think a lot of our leaders and legislators are, but so many of them actually aren't. We saw the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, come out, and he's sharing his pronouns in his bio, whatever that means, and
he actually also vetoed
to kids
the trans sports bill.
And so did the governor in Indiana, and then you've got Asa Hutchinson in Arkansas, who is in support of child chemical castration. It's like, why don't we recognize that we need to be protecting our children, and that's what parents want?
Because they're sellouts.
Yeah,
they're being
and
paid by
that's exactly
somebody
right.
to do this nonsense.
Whether it's
or
Big
power.
Pharma or whether it's the NCAA with the sports things. I know that the people
Mm-hmm.
in Indiana, they really want to host March Madness in the Final Four in that big, beautiful stadium in Indianapolis, so they're not willing to risk it. But at the end of the day, if you're going to play sports teams and profit over children's innocence, then you don't get to call yourself a conservative, and you shouldn't get to call yourself a leader in the United States of America.
Yeah.
So we have to demand better, and this idea that we are living in a period of time where we should be willing to compromise with the left and find common ground with the left, until they give up this crusade to destroy our children, there's no room for common ground, there's no room for compromise, there's no room for bipartisanship, there's no room for voting on the president's Supreme Court nominee, right? We need to grow a backbone.
Well, I think that is true when we're talking about the left. I really think there are thousands upon thousands of liberals in this country who have historically voted with the left, but now all of a sudden find themselves totally disenfranchised by everything that's happening because
we
they're
need to
like,
take those folks
I
out.
don't support trans surgeries for 5-year-olds.
They've just gone too far.
Yeah, and so I think there's an opportunity to reach those people, which is great, and become the party of the parents. I actually really like that slogan. I think that's great.
Right.
I do think also we need to become the party of the parents in terms of other people too.
Yeah.
So there are many parents, for example, who don't care about what their children are learning, and we need to be advocates for them
Yeah,
too.
we absolutely do. What's crazy to me in our last few minutes is that the left is saying the quiet part out loud. Nobody's hiding this. Even just 6 months ago, it was, oh, we're not teaching your kids about sex. What are you talking about? That's like right-wing conspiracy theory. That's a talking point from parents who are domestic terrorists at school board meetings.
And now,
Loudoun County's whole situation just, 8 months ago, 9 months ago, was crazy.
Yes.
And all of these school board members like, we don't know what you're talking about. This has never
That's
been
what started
part
this
of our
whole
priority.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing hundreds of teachers on TikTok brag about talking about their sex life to 5-year-olds. The President of the United States publicly came forward and said, yes, we support trans surgeries and chemical castration for children, not even just teenagers, like kids. How do you fight that?
Well, the problem with the left, and they call themselves progressives, the issue is they have to keep progressing, whatever that means. You can't just draw a line and say, we're here now.
Oh, yeah. No.
So they have to embrace more and more radical ideas just to show that they are moving against the norm, because the mainstream becomes the right. And so they have to become more and more extreme just to show that they're changing in some way.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because that's how I feel about it. Their ideology is totalitarianism in every facet of of anything that they believe. So there is no ending point. It just continues to dissolve into chaos. And I'm trying to figure out the timeline of which it will be the president endorsing pedophilia and from like an institutional level. Like that is where we're headed. That's always been the agenda, I believe.
Are we not there right now?
That's what I'm
with
saying.
Everything happening with
like,
Disney?
Yes, it's like it's getting very close. I'm waiting for them to all explicitly say, like, this maps thing is this is a real thing that we need to embrace.
I say give it a year.
I was just going to say, I think in about a year, pedophilia will be mainstream, and we will all have been right again, and our poor children are...
I hope not. I hope we fight against it significantly now, that doesn't become mainstream. I mean, that's my hope.
Well,
I think 2022 will spark panic in them, and I think they'll pull back on the gas a little bit.
Interesting.
I think this is going to blow up in their face.
I certainly hope it does. But I mean, I'm old enough to remember back in 2015 when Obergefell got to the court, and the gay movement in America fought so hard for the right to get married, right? And we were told at the time, if you were a conservative who was saying, be careful, this is a slippery slope, that you're some sort of a right-wing extremist and a homophobe or whatever. We were told that by people in our own party, in our own movement. Now we're seeing the effects of what that slippery slope actually leads to. And you're right, Lily, it is pedophilia. It is these weird, penis surgeries and castrations and all this stuff. So let's just, as a movement, we need to be mindful of whenever the left comes out with all this like radical stuff that they're trying to sell as normal, like let's take a closer look at it, step back, pause, and reflect on what the true agenda is here, because that's how we got ourselves in this mess in the first place.
And
we allowed degeneracy to take over the institution of marriage.
And just not be afraid anymore. Like, we are so past the deadline of the silent majority staying silent. People have to get vocal, because this isn't just about who you vote for, this is about your children now. And I am totally convinced the reason the left is doing this is because they can convince children that the most innate thing about them that drives every other aspect of their personality, their
100%.
perspective on the world, how they stress out, what they're passionate about. If they can convince them that was like oppressively put on them by another person, they can convince them of anything.
Absolutely.
Lily, Ian, Connor, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you back here tomorrow on TPUSA Live.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily, powered by Turning Point USA. Top story tonight, a jury has found Michigan militia members not guilty after an FBI entrapment operation. We'll break it down next. Trapped in COVID-19 terror lockdowns, Shanghai civilians have begun to fight back against the CCP. Third, new release from Project Veritas, Hillary Clinton denies knowing a Dem operative linked to inciting violence at Trump rallies on behalf of the Clinton campaign. And finally, Posobiec, that's me, was temporarily locked out of Twitter after calling Disney groomers. We'll break it all down. All this more ahead, Human Events Daily.
We're grateful to the FBI and law enforcement to discover these domestic terrorists and stop them. And make no mistake, that's who they are, domestic terrorists, flat terrorists. Planning to blow up a bridge on American soil to threaten the lives of police officers, to kidnap an elected leader. And now we're finding out the same thing was happening in Virginia. You know, it's the sort of behavior you might expect from ISIS. And it shouldn't shock the conscience of every American. Every American. And the failure to condemn these folks is stunning.
Out of Michigan, a major story that drives directly to the credibility of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Julie Kelly at American Greatness has the story. In a huge defeat for the U.S. Department of Justice, a jury today acquitted 2 men accused of conspiring to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the fall of 2020. You remember that kidnapping plot? We were all told, right? That was the major story on the left In October of 2020, it's the only thing they were talking about. Look, I've got some friends, some family members, people I grew up with that are on the left, that are on the other side, that I still talk to. And they were all sending me this Michigan militia plot. They were like, this is you guys, this is what all the, conservatives, this is what you all stand for. It turns out that a jury just found the two ringleaders of this thing, the conspiracy to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, not guilty. They were acquitted because it turns out the entire thing was an FBI entrapment operation. This thing was put on, and we've gone through chapter and verse of how this operation was run. We have the text messages of them talking to their informants about how they were going to do it, about how they wanted to entrap as many people as possible because they wanted bigger headlines. And you can see them trying to ramp this up right before the election of 2020. Why would the FBI be doing something like that? I don't know. That's very strange. And why was it that the special agent in charge of the Detroit field office later was transferred to the Washington field office just before the events of January 6th? Just questions. The verdicts were announced at the Gerald R. Ford Federal Building in Grand Rapids after more than 4 days of deliberations. Jurors heard 13 days of testimony in a case the government considered one of the biggest domestic terrorism investigations ever. Daniel Harris and Brandon Caserta of Michigan were found not guilty, exonerated of conspiring to unlawfully seize, confine, conduct, abduct, and carry away and hold for ransom or reward or otherwise the governor of the state of Michigan. Jurors could not reach unanimous decision for Adam Fox and Barry Croft, two other members, resulting in a mistrial. Harris was also found not guilty of conspiring to use weapons of mass destruction for allegedly attempting to build an explosive device to use in the abduction scheme and other firearms charges. Let me break down what's going on here. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, a federal agent's, especially, by the way, an FBI agent's testimony at a trial was considered the gold standard. It was the number one. And if you were running a case like this and you had FBI all over it, profilers, crime scene investigators, forensics, the techs, the whole 9 yards, it was a done deal. It was locked because juries trusted the FBI. But after the events of the last 6 years, people have begun in this country to look at the FBI under a different light. And now they're not the gold standard. Now they're the gutter standard. Because when you put them all up there and you look at the evidence, the jury sat and listened to every single one of these FBI experts who testified at length for over 2 weeks in this trial. And at the end of it, they said, no, we ain't buying it. You lied, you set up these guys, you wanted them to take the fall, you entrapped them. This wouldn't have existed had the FBI not set up this operation. And by the way, the FBI was doing this to young Muslims and immigrants all throughout the war on terror here in the United States. They were overlooking actual plots and actual radicals while they were entrapping people. Why? Because they wanted to meet quotas, because they wanted headlines, because they wanted to look big, they wanted to get funding. And back then the funding was all in radical Islamic terrorism. Now it's domestic terrorism. So mark my words, you're going to see more of this, and there's going to be a backlash.
Please comply with COVID restrictions. Control your soul's desire for freedom. Do not open the window or sing.
The terror lockdowns of Shanghai are continuing. 26 million people live within the confines of the city of Shanghai. They are being put on lockdown. Many of them are starving. You got people freaking out. They're dragging you into the street, forcing you to kneel down to take a test for COVID. If you don't take the test, you get hauled off. If you test positive, you get sent to a quarantine center where you're placed en masse with everyone who's also positive, and then you have to stay there in these open air, open bay centers until you test negative. Explain how that makes any sense, by the way. Doesn't make any sense. Because obviously people there are just giving it to each other. Or if you had someone who was a false positive, they're definitely going to be positive if you put them in with other infected people. That's 26 million people. The lockdowns now in China, the CCP is spreading them to 23 different cities in mainland China. Partial and full lockdowns. That's up to 193 million people that are being placed under these conditions. And you got people who aren't eating. You've got people in Shanghai now every single day. Be very careful, by the way. I'll tell you right now. If you go onto the internet, if you go, whatever your social media choice is, Twitter, Getter, Instagram, etc., you type in the word Shanghai and you see the videos that pop up, you will see some horrific and brutal stuff. So I just want you to be warned. I want you to be very careful what's happening. People jumping off of buildings, committing suicide, rounding up neighborhood pets, cats and dogs, and killing them in the street. That's what CCP medical officials are doing. And over the weekend in Shanghai, they sent more troops from the People's Liberation Army into the city. You got the videos of the trucks rolling in, the uniforms, then they're suited up in the biohazard suits, walking around carrying assault rifles. And this is Shanghai. This is China's most populous, wealthiest city. So why is China doing this? A lot of people are asking, why is China going to such great lengths? And I know there was a school of thought out there that said, oh, this was all propaganda. The videos that China was putting out in early 2019, or late 2019, early 2020, that was all propaganda that was designed to trick the West, etc. No, it never was. No, it never was. 100% real. They are terrified of COVID. And I remember when I lived in Shanghai in the mid-2000s, I remember it wasn't too far removed from the SARS outbreaks, and they were terrified of a SARS outbreak. They fought tooth and nail against that, and if there were anyone who was even suspected of having something even remotely similar to the SARS outbreak, they were locking you down, they were sending you off. And why? Why is this? Well, one reason that I could give up, and I said this on episode 1, day 1 of War Room Pandemic, over 2 years ago. I have to ask Bannon if he can pull the clip. It's me discussing the mandate of heaven and the theory of dynastic cycles in Chinese history. So what is this? What is this? All right. So the theory of dynastic cycles and the mandate of heaven go hand in hand. So the idea being that every dynasty of China goes through a certain cycle. And the cycle is the dynasty is erected, the dynasty is prosperous, the dynasty is successful, but then the dynasty decays, the dynasty is corrupt, and then at the moment the dynasty becomes corrupted and feeble and incompetent, natural disasters are set upon the land. Earthquakes, plagues, famine, pestilence, right? You get the idea. So when that happens, when they have these plagues, these pestilence that set upon the land, and the regime can't do anything to fix it or stop it, that's when it's a sign. That's when it becomes a sign that the people of the land need to rise up because the regime, the God Emperor on the dragon throne, has lost the mandate of heaven. And then it becomes the right of the people to rebel and to erect a new dynasty. And so if you use that, if you use that as a heuristic to understand how the CCP operates, are they just the latest dynasty in a long, 5,000 year back history of dynasties of China? If they can't control an outbreak, does that show them as losing the mandate of heaven? And so you can also look, of course, at the practical considerations of this, that if they can't control one of these things, if they don't have the ability to set upon the populace like they did after the events of Tiananmen, then, of course, the people are going to rebel. But you've also got a situation now where people in the cities themselves, because these draconian terror lockdowns are so onerous, because people are starving, you actually have food riots going on now within Shanghai and other cities of China. You got people that are bucking at this terror, this straight up terror that's being feasted upon the people. And people are fighting back, and people are rising up. So we're going to see what happens. Will the CCP back off the terror lockdowns, or will they continue? 26 million people in the city of Shanghai, 193 million people, the victims of the CCP.
I just wanted to ask, Shirley Teeter, she was recently ordered to pay Project Veritas's legal expenses relating from a lawsuit.
I don't understand.
Yeah, she was linked to Democracy Partners, your good friend Bob Kramer.
Hillary is aware of all the work that you guys do, I hope.
The campaign is fully in it.
And then they tell Hillary what's going on.
Well, Hillary knows her chain of command.
Yeah.
You remember Democracy Partners?
I don't know about Kramer.
I just want to ask, will you pay her legal bills? She's an old woman. She's been ordered to pay her legal bills.
I don't know Bob Kramer.
You don't know Bob Kramer, really?
The future president of the United States who wanted ducks on the ground. So by God, we will give ducks on the ground. Don't repeat that statement.
I don't know Shirley Teeter.
So completely amazing right there, right? You got Secretary Hillary Clinton, the failed 2016 candidate, and she's actually asked about this question. She said, was this person required to pay the legal fees? Did they call for violence? And she's, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's so crazy. That's so silly. You gotta love Project Veritas for holding her feet to the fire on this. Post Millennial wrote the whole thing up. Shirley Teeter sued the investigative organization for defamation and lost back in 2019. Then she was ordered to pay the legal bills of Project Veritas. She alleged they had defamed her when they claimed she was a plant at a Trump rally in the lead up to the 2016 election. Teeter denied being a plant and sued. She lost despite having 6 attorneys on hand to help her. I wonder where she got the legal fees for 6 attorneys. She then has been ordered to pay Project Veritas's legal fees. The allegation is that the group Democracy Partners had organized the operatives at Trump rallies, and that this was done on behalf of the Clinton campaign. Remember, these are part of the dirty tricks all leading up to the dossier. So violence in the streets and violence at the rallies was the first dirty trick. The next dirty trick was the dirty dossier. All of this we know has come out in court. So this is a court battle that came out for the dirty tricks of violence in the streets at the rallies. Then we've got the court battle going on for the Sussman case and the Durham investigation, and they're going through the dossier at this point. Everything that the Clinton campaign was doing in 2016 has found its way into court, and they keep losing after losing after losing. When Project Veritas reporters sought comment from Clinton on Shirley Teeter being ordered to pay the organization's legal costs, Clinton reportedly denied knowing her, or its former president Bob Kramer saying, I don't understand. I don't know Bob Kramer. So here's the way it worked. Here's the way it worked, all right? It was this idea of bird dogging, right? So what was bird dogging? They sent these operatives in to remind people. Can you believe it's been 6 years since all this happened? Maybe 7 if you count some of the early stuff in 2015. They would send operatives in, and then they would target somebody, and they would say, look, that's my mark, all right? I'm going to target this mark, and that looks like someone that I can tease into aggression. And so I go out there, and I'm pushing them, and I'm yelling at them, and I'm getting in their face, and I'm screaming at them, I'm bird dogging them, right? And then that person lashes out. And so when the cameras start rolling, or you've got, if you're smart, you've got another person on the side that's setting up the video, they start filming, but they don't film the part where you were actually the one that was inciting the incident. You only film the person's response to it, and then that goes viral. And I still remember the headlines of this because this is really when the first time Antifa crossed my radar in 2016 at the DNC. The headlines would always say, violence breaks out at Trump rally. Violence breaks out at Trump rally. But you never got the story that the people that were being attacked were Trump supporters, and the people that were conducting the attacks was this group called Antifa. There was actually this whole huge thing for years that CNN wouldn't even say the word Antifa, wouldn't even be brought up, wouldn't even be something that they would say. They wouldn't even say the word. The mainstream media's greatest, their absolute greatest power is the power of story selection bias and sins of omission. Sins of omission. Because by not telling you about something from their megaphone, from their giant platform, they can actually make it seem as though something doesn't exist. And that's exactly what it was here. And by the way, Secretary Clinton maybe didn't even know about this stuff. Maybe she doesn't know the specific names, right? Because this was a massive operation, a huge machine. The DNC, the campaign, they were all working in concert. Yeah, she may not know the names and the details of every person that was working under her, the same way she probably doesn't know the names of the sources of the Steele dossier or even know who Christopher Steele is. But she knows these operations because she's the one who paid for them. So I'm going through my phone on Sunday morning, and we were out in Omaha, where we had flown in to do an event with the Nebraska Freedom Coalition. And we actually did another event the night before in Ogallala, Nebraska, all the way out in western Nebraska. And I got to tell you something. Western Nebraska is God's country, ladies and gentlemen, absolute God's country. Then we fly to Omaha the next day because we got an event there, and then finally we make it to D.C. to do the show for today. So I fire up my phone first thing, Palm Sunday morning, and I'm going to do, usually my first tweet is something, it's either a Bible verse or I say, wake up, pray up, something like that. And especially wanted to start tweeting about Palm Sunday, the beginning of Holy Week, going into the Passiontide. And I get a message on my phone that says, your account has been locked out due to blah, blah, blah activity. I'm like, what's going on? What happened? Somebody hacked me? What's happening here? I said, you have a tweet that we don't like. We're very, very upset at your tweet. I said, what was the tweet? Well, it was a t-shirt. It was a t-shirt that said, boycott groomers, and had a picture of Disney World, and the famous Disney logo from the Magic Kingdom, the castle. Everybody knows what that is. And I was suspended for 12 hours in the penalty box, temporary lockout in the penalty box for 12 hours over posting that up. The only other time that I've ever been locked out on Twitter in my life, coming up on 10 years here in May, on that accursed platform, was over the Hunter Biden laptop. And so I'm sitting there looking at it going, what? And I'm reading the discussion, and it says, you kind of the harassment of sexual orientation or gender identity, all these things. I didn't know groomer was a gender identity, right? And then I realized what's going on, though. So we all know that Disney is very, 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 and this is one of the reasons that I thought that t-shirt in the first instance would probably get banned, because Disney is very, very careful about their logos. They're very careful about their images, their trademarks, and they employ all sorts of scrub. They're constantly scrubbing the internet, scrubbing YouTube, looking for people that are using their stuff. And so I thought for sure I'm going to get hit with something like that, maybe like copyright infringement, one of those. No. They said it was harassment. And I said, boy, I didn't know groomer was a gender identity. But then I thought about it. For a second. This last week, what did we report on? We reported on that forum, that internal Disney forum, where all the people that we saw, not all the people that were in there, but all the people that we reported on, were coming out in support of Governor DeSantis and in support of his anti-grooming bill. And we had post after post after post. We made sure to block out all the names, all the faces. We kept it completely anonymous, right? But we have the receipts. We can prove where it came from. We reported the truth that you've got people in that company and people in those parks that just want to work there, and they want to provide a fun family atmosphere for people to go and have a good time at a park. And they don't want to get interested in politics, and they certainly don't want to support grooming. So I guess what we have here is a civil war going on within the Disney company. And Walt Disney would be spinning in his grave. Yes, his grave, the icebox thing, that was kind of an urban legend. Because Walt Disney, the man, hated communists. He hated people infiltrating Hollywood. He testified to Congress, go look it up, that communists were infiltrating Hollywood and that they were getting onto his movie sets. Now they've got into his company, and now you've got people inside that company that are pushing this stuff that amounts actively to grooming children, and they're opposing DeSantis' law on the grooming of children. So don't worry, Disney. We've got more receipts on you, and they're all coming out. Well, that's all the time we have here, Human Events Daily, for today. Remember, our promise, our oath, our solemn vow to you: be good, be brief, be gone. Your homework for us: share this out with just one of your normie friends, and leave us your 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your politics. What did we talk about today? A jury found the Michigan militia not guilty after FBI entrapment. Next, the terror lockdowns in Shanghai as civilians are fighting back against the CCP. We talked about Project Veritas going up and confronting Secretary Clinton over inciting violence at Trump rallies. And finally, we talked about yours truly being temporarily locked out of Twitter after calling Disney a bunch of groomers. And let me just say again for the record, Disney is a bunch of groomers. But before we go, it's time for today's history break. Today in 1970 was the launch of Apollo 13. One of the most epic movies, one of the most epic stories, one of the most epic moments of America and the American people and what we will do to bring our men home. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.
You guys, welcome back to Freedom Papers. This is Morgan Zegers. I'm sitting here with Connor Clegg. Hello, Connor.
Hi, everybody.
And today we're talking about, shocker, shocker, Federalist Paper 24, because last week we did 23. This week we're doing 24. Who knows what paper we're going to do next? It's a mystery. You guys, if you haven't used my code Morgan to get to YWLS, you can use code Morgan for 25% off your ticket to YWLS. It used to be 50. If you haven't used the 51, I'm sorry, ladies and gents, but now it's only 25. I was just warned by the higher-ups that it's gone down. Womp, womp.
Snooze, you lose.
Yeah, I feel bad. So I'm sorry. I wish that I knew that it was going to go down. I had no idea. I would have warned you. So here's the thing, Connor. Today, we're kind of continuing the same issues. We're talking about actually some Wild Wild West stuff.
Yeah,
that's what I liked most about this paper. It's called The Powers Necessary to the Common Defense Further Considered. This one was only by Hamilton.
Yes.
Let's see what Publius starts out with, because this is kind of an all-over-the-place paper, people. It's one specific topic, so basically a standing army, but man, he covers a lot of random crap, including cowboys versus Indians, baby.
Oh, yeah.
So he says, to the powers proposed to be conferred upon the federal government in respect to the creation and direction of the national forces, I have met with but one specific objection, which if I understand it rightly, is this, that proper provision has not been made against the existence of standing armies in time of peace, an objection which I shall now endeavor to show rests on weak and unsubstantial foundations. Now, Connor, before I ask you what your thoughts are, you guys, this is a debate between the anti-federalists and the federalists, and this is one of the more attacky style, let's call it that, the attacky style papers by the federalists attacking the anti-federalists. The federalists, as usual, did not want to repeat a King George. They were very worried about the power given to the federal government in this circumstance. They didn't want to create a too strong of a central government, and they really saw the ability for the federalists via their promotion of the Constitution. They saw in the Constitution a really big concern that the federal government would be handed this full control, never-ending power to control a standing army that would be used to oppress the people. We see it play out in a certain way in American history. I would say what came to my mind, and I hope we can get into this, is the idea that our standing army kind of hurts more people outside of the country than it does in, and that's not exactly touched on in this paper, because the anti-federalists were more so worried about protecting the American citizens from tyranny and oppression. But then we talk about what the federalists say, and it's basically Hamilton's defense against their concerns. Connor, first thoughts. What do you got?
My first thoughts come from what Hamilton talks about towards the end of the paper, where it seems like he's making an argument for something that would come to be known during the Reagan years as peace through strength, right? Which is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Sorry, I got
Clearly,
so excited.
It's one of my Morgan's favorite things.
I forgot to bring that up, but yes, that's what I got too.
And that's such a cool thing, and it's so missing right now in our foreign policy that we're living through right now, right? But yeah, I love that comes up, and I'd like to think that Reagan and his foreign policy advisors, whenever they were coming up with that policy, were informed by what Hamilton wrote down here in Federalist 24. So
Connor,
we'll get into that later. But
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what came to my mind is, but I'm a big peace through strength kind of girl.
Right.
And I know Connor is. And what we see here is this worry that a constant army would hurt the people, but in reality, it made us stronger, I would say, on the world stage to have a strong military presence. Yeah, totally. You don't use it. You don't use it to hurt people. You don't use it to oppress people if it's limited and if it's restricted in terms of what it can do, but it's ready to fight when it's needed. Readiness. I mean, my dad's in the military. He just retired. But he would always talk about readiness. Readiness is the core focus, and it still is today with the NDAA. And so I was kind of conflicted because last paper, you and I were in agreement that Publius was a little off in the sense of demanding that the military have all power that it needs, or what was it? It was the federal government basically has no limitations when it comes to the common defense.
Right.
And that's a little scary. And so we weren't really on his side, but now I'm seeing his side a little bit more in terms of we do need to have this presence at least.
Right. Well, it just, he was basically saying that there can never be any restrictions to how much power they can have and how much power
they can exert over the American people or whoever. But that was a little bit scary. But I think that it's fair to say that we should have a large standing military at all times to defend us from threats, both foreign and domestic.
Mhm.
It's just about how we wield that power.
Yeah.
And what restraints there are on the people who will wield that power.
Yeah, and this is a shorter paper. It's more simple. The topic is straight to the point in
Mhm.
many ways. But at the same time, this is a great example of a paper that goes back and forth with the anti-federalists and the federalists. And so again, you guys, I encourage you to not just read the Federalist Papers, but also the anti-federalist papers. And specifically, I want to talk about the language, because in the anti-federalist papers, they like to call out the fact that Hamilton specifically did this, but Publius uses very fanciful language.
Right.
And, it's very high-end, I guess you could say, in terms of picking fancy
Highfalutin.
words. Yeah, it was, he was kind of showing off, I would say, his
Right.
vocabulary. And he's very witty in this paper. And so I don't think you were there. It was the paper where I talked about the Netherlands.
No, I missed that
But
one.
we read one of the anti-federalist papers, and the guy signs off as like a Rhode Island man or something like that.
Yeah.
Because he just wanted to be known, and he was like, I'm not going to use fanciful language. I'm not going to try and convince you with my prose. Instead, I'm going to sign off like an average or common man,
Yeah.
a Rhode Island man or something. It was so cool. And I'm probably totally messing up that quote, and I'm super sorry. But here's a good example of how he uses storytelling almost and imagination in this paper. He imagines what someone reading and seeing this debate playing out would think if he hadn't read the U.S. Constitution
Right.
or the Articles of Confederation. He says, a stranger to our politics who was to read our newspapers at the present juncture without having previously inspected the plan reported by the convention would be naturally led to one of the two conclusions, either that it contained a positive injunction and standing armies should be kept up in time of peace, or that it vested in the executive the whole power of levying troops without subjecting his discretion in any shape to the control of the legislature. If he came afterwards to peruse the plan itself, he would be surprised to discover that neither the one nor the other was the case, that the whole power of raising armies was lodged in the legislature, not in the executive, that this legislature was to be a popular body consisting of the representatives of the people periodically elected, and that instead of the provision he had supposed in favor of standing armies, there was to be found in respect to this object an important qualification even of the legislative discretion in that clause which forbids the appropriation of money for the support of an army for any longer than 2 years. Now, what he's saying there is
impressive.
I don't think I messed up at all this
You did.
time.
That's very
Guys,
good.
that was a long quote for me. Maybe I'm improving. I'm building my endurance. Dom, the editor, is like, thank goodness. Gosh, she's so hard to edit content for. But I'm glad I got through that. I can't help but not recognize it. So I think it's really smart for him to say this because it kind of accuses almost in an indirect way the anti-federalists of exaggerating
Right.
the circumstances. And I think that was smart because it's easier for people to understand. You've got to remember these papers are intended for average people to be reading
Yeah.
and impacting their voting decisions.
Right.
And so you can't be talking like a fancy lawyer guy all the time.
Exactly. It was a subtle shot across the bow,
Mhm.
and it was probably very digestible and palatable for a lot of people who are going to be reading it, which, like you said, are just common folks. But yeah, he's exactly right in everything that he says here, and it's a really smart way to raise the objections that the anti-federalists have and address them without actually making it seem like it's specifically attacking any one person, right?
Yeah. There's if you keep going, he just kind of addresses the realities versus what the anti-federalists are saying and what they're kind of framing their argument around, saying
Right.
that they're kind of worrying about something that doesn't exist.
Right.
And he's encouraging people to read the actual Articles of Confederation and Constitution to properly understand what the current situation is.
That's exactly like what we're seeing, not to tie it back too much to current events, but it's exactly like what we're seeing with the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. Have you seen this, right?
Connor, fantastic
So
connection.
they're saying that this bill, it's so funny actually. They're putting billboards all over the state of Florida that just say the word gay on them, right?
Oh.
And they're saying that the bill bars people from saying gay. And if you just listen to the media narrative, you would think that it's a very simple bill that says teachers can't say the word gay. But in fact, the word gay doesn't appear anywhere in the bill. It's only 7 pages. You can read it for yourself.
They're genius marketers.
They're
them
so
lefties.
smart. They're so damn smart, but they're so sinister, right?
Yeah.
But that's exactly kind of what's going on here. It's like, look, don't just buy into what the narrative is saying, what the propagandists are saying. Like, there's a lot of actual substance here in this beautiful Constitution. It was written intently by very smart people. You should read it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Try it out.
Did I tell you I was so frustrated because I posted a video of me baking muffins like I usually do, like the future amazing homesteader, homemaker that I am. So I'm making muffins, Connor, in my kitchen, and I posted a little video of how I was baking and watching the State of the Union. I'm a big believer in watching the original situation happen. I want to see the press conference. I want to see the State of the Union speech.
The hearing. This is
I
like-
want to see the hearing.
This is
the
like the
SCOTUS
Super Bowl
hearing.
for us right now, watching these Super Bowl or these
Oh.
Supreme Court hearings every day.
Absolutely. And people that tell me, first of all, that you don't have time, I'm sorry. When you're cooking or when you're driving or when you're on your workout, there's nothing wrong with keeping some headphones in and just listening quickly. You're going to benefit from it so much because on conservative side or liberal side or leftist side, you're going to hear people's interpretations of what happened. And maybe they will say, you know what, Joe Biden lied. Joe Biden was ridiculous. He gaslighted us, all this stuff. But you won't really know what it's like to be gaslit until you hear how a person delivers the message and then you hear and understand what actually happened. You have to have that connection happen in your own mind instead of just someone saying you've been gaslit. Because then if you're asked to explain the situation, you're going to be like, well, I heard that he did. I just value it so much to understand, and especially these days when the media lies to us, politicians lie to us, we need to, as humans, be able to watch someone say really, feel good language and then look at the impact of their actual policies.
Right.
I think that has such an impact on people. And so I like to see it. Same thing with this. You cannot hear what one side is saying without reading the original document, or else you're going to get a little misled. Both sides do a little misleading, but let's go and see what Publius says, because he gets kind of funny in these. He says, if this man that he's, imagining right now, he says, if he happened to be a man of quick sensibility or ardent temper, he could now no longer refrain from pronouncing these clamors to be the dishonest artifices of a sinister and unprincipled opposition to a plan which ought to at least receive a fair and candid examination from all sincere lovers of their country. It's like, he's just going off at this point, basically saying that if you looked at both situations and evaluated the actual documents, you'd see that one side is clearly not having your best interest at hand. He then goes on to say, even such a man could hardly forbear remarking that a conduct of this kind has too much the appearance of an intention to mislead the people by alarming their passions, rather than to convince them by arguments addressed to their understandings. Dun, dun, dun. It's kind of like what the left does today. They pull at our emotions. They want us to support all the welfare programs to help the one single mother with 5 kids that's on the social programs that we just need to keep paying for with our taxes. They find the perfect little emotional story, and it makes everybody feel super bad about themselves.
Yeah, or like lock down in your home for 2 years, or else you're going to kill your grandma.
Oh, we don't want that to happen.
Pay more for gas because you're saving the environment and you're opposing Putin, who's a terrible person, right?
Yeah, you're protecting democracy by paying $7 for your gallon of gas.
Obviously.
That's
Don't
how it
you
works,
know?
Connor. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that actually. But what exactly is he referencing here? If I'm reading it right, he's saying that folks are scared that a permanent standing army, right, would be used to, commit tyrannical actions or force against the people of America. Is that what he's getting at?
Yeah, I think in this sense, they're worried that it's going to be used against the people of America. And that's what I find kind of interesting, because in many ways, people are worried. Like, you hear the police these days saying, we're just going to enforce the mandates because that's our job and we're just doing our job. And so you could totally see that of the military members, whoever it is in power now, they say, oh, well, we're just doing our jobs. But I make the argument now, after reading this, I was kind of like, if anything, the military-industrial complex, it's bad for our veterans, it's bad for our service members, it puts us in endless wars. But more importantly, it's hurting a lot of people out in the country. Because if you think about it, I mean, just look at the Afghanistan decision. Not only did we pull out and hurt all the people in that country who are relying on us, but then we did things like, oh, well, now we just, as the U.S. military, can bomb someone, and then it ends up being a building with innocent children in it because Biden made a terrible decision and wanted to convince us that he got the suicide bomber from ISIS, when in reality he droned an innocent family. So it's like, in that way, I think more so our military is out of control with its power and hurting others. So that it goes both ways, international and domestic.
Well, I mean, we have to realize that the domestic effects of what the military does abroad and what the military leaders in Washington, D.C. and at the Pentagon, their actions have direct consequences when it comes to energy policy, obviously, right? So everything that we're doing with Putin and Russia right now has an impact on what our gas prices look like. It's not Putin's fault. It's our fault, right? In a lot of ways. What the military does in terms of Afghanistan, for example, it weakens America on the world stage, which means that countries have to go to places like China for trading, which hurts our farmers, which hurts our small businesses, our merchants, our domestic production at any rate. And it hurts our national security, right? So Americans can't sleep safely or soundly in their beds at night because they fear attack and global domination from our enemies because the impacts of the decisions made by our military and our leaders in the Pentagon, right? So there's very, very real direct impacts to be had by our military outside of just, invading our homes or sleeping in our houses or quartering troops or whatever and bombing American cities. We don't have to worry about our military attacking us more often than not. But we do need to worry about what our military is doing overseas because it has an impact on us.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely affects everybody. And to hear the connections, I can't remember where exactly it is in this paper, but it has to do with limiting the oppressiveness, I guess you could say, of the military. And that's what kind of led me to, it's hard for them to have assumed that something like the military-industrial complex could have been created. It's like we didn't have the Industrial Revolution. We didn't have the ability to foresee the improvements in technology back then. But to see what it's become now, it reminded me so much of this, of like we have this almost standing army in the sense of this huge industry, the industrial complex that exists, and it's hurting not just us, but everybody worldwide. Then he gets into more specific things, and this is where the concept of peace through strength really came to my mind when we started talking about things like the Western expansion and everything. First, though, he talks about Europe. He says, though a wide ocean separates the United States from Europe, yet there are various considerations that warn us against an excess of confidence or security. So don't get too confident thinking we just won this war. I mean, you guys, the War of 1812 was just right around the corner.
Right around the corner, right.
So, and that's something, too. So we've been doing curriculum at Turning Point. That we're working on, not curriculum, but like more educational style videos. And I'm doing some constitutional stuff right now. And I did one on the kind of the transition period between the Treaty of Paris and what wasn't addressed. And then when we sent John Jay over, who wrote papers 2 through 5, he actually went back over and signed Jay's treaty. And so he had to go back over because there was still some conflict and some growing tension. And it didn't stop the growing tension. It did, though, postpone, I guess you could say, another war. And so instead of going right to war, we ended up pushing it back until the War of 1812. And it was for things like when England gave up the Northwest Territory to us, which doubled the size of our country and allowed us to pursue westward expansion, they didn't give up their forts that they said they were going to. And so it was kind of like you didn't meet that requirement. Another one was that America promised to treat the Americans or the colonists that were still loyal to the British and didn't join the rebel side. They had promised to treat them fairly and not take their property. And the Americans were like, screw you, give us your farms. And I was like, oh, I hate to read that stuff because it's like nobody's perfect. And I'm sure they were quite frustrated that there were loyalists that were.
I think it was kind of justified, though. But that's just
so either way, it was an agreement section, a term of the Treaty of Paris. It wasn't met. And so there was many things that led to it. But you have to keep in mind, as these tensions are growing because both sides aren't sticking to the rules, this is written in 1787. The War of 1812 is just a couple decades down the road. And so this is written at an important time when they feel like something might happen. They didn't just win independence and then guarantee peace forever with England. So that's what it's saying here. It's like, don't get too confident. Europe isn't that far away. They only have to cross an ocean, which I guess is ironic. Like, I get an ocean is very large. But all they have to do is ship themselves across the ocean, and they still have a ton of people here. They could fight us. So they say, on one side of us and stretching far into our rear are growing settlements subject to the dominion of Britain. On the other side, and extending to meet the British settlements, are colonies and establishments subjected to the dominion of Spain. So you've still got to deal with England, still dealing with Spain on the territory next to their own country. So then it says, this situation and the vicinity of the West India Islands belonging to these two partners create between them, in respect to their American possessions and in relation to us, a common interest. The savage tribes on our western frontier ought to be regarded as our natural enemies, their natural allies, because they have most to fear from us and most to hope from them. The improvements in the art of navigation have, as to the facility of communication, rendered distant nations, in a great measure, neighbors. What a hot sentence. Let's reread that one. The improvements in the art of navigation have, as to the facility of communication, rendered distant nations, in a great measure, neighbors. So people that used to be like forever away that you probably would never have to deal with, they're now your neighbors.
Right.
The great advancements in technology, thanks to mankind, what do you know, are biting us in the butt because now we have greater amounts of enemies to worry about. I like that, though. I like that they didn't make me say navigable waters, but I just said it.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean,
You're
that's a good point
reclaiming that
because
word.
I thought it was interesting because they talked about that as if it was such a positive thing for all those reasons in previous papers, and now it's like, well, yeah, it could also help transport people that want to invade us, so
really
we
a
should
threat.
keep that in mind.
Well, think about it. Hamilton came from present-day Haiti, right? He was born there. I could be wrong. It's Haiti or the Dominican Republic, one of those two. But somewhere in the Caribbean, right? So the Caribbean at the time were also known as the West Indies, and they were controlled by first the French and then the British. So there was a lot of jockeying for power among those island nations, and it's the same reason why we got into the Cuban Missile Crisis so many centuries or so many decades later, was that our leaders recognized what a inherent threat that was so many or so few miles off the shore of Florida and the rest of the southern United States, right? So they had to recognize that there were threats that were not just an ocean away, but just, going over the Gulf of Mexico away. So that was a really important thing that they had the foresight to call out ahead of time. Because like I said, Hamilton came over there. It was really easy for him to do it. Who's to say it's not easy for a bunch of platoon of British ships to come over, right?
Yeah.
So that was incredibly smart. We're also talking about the biggest and the foremost maritime powers of world history, right?
Yeah.
The English and the Spanish. So there was a lot of real threats, and the ocean was great. It was a really good buffer, but it's not going to stop them. If they want to get over here, they're going to get over here, and we saw that in 1812. So the best thing that we could have done to deter that, and what the argument that they're making is to have a strong and ready and well-equipped military that says, hey, you can come over here, you can make this trek and this voyage, but if you do, we're going to be ready to fight back, and we're going to make it not worth your time, and it's going to cost you a lot of lives and a lot of money.
Yeah.
So.
No, great way to put it, Connor. So they talk about the foreign people that we're dealing with.
Oh, yeah, and then the Indians. I forgot about that.
Well, yeah, that's what comes in next. So they're kind of talking about this idea of protecting the western frontier.
Mm-hmm.
And Alaska's a last frontier. I don't know if I could say that. Is that get copyrighted?
What?
Do you know that show, Alaska's Last Frontier?
I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's a great show. I'm from the Adirondacks, and so I'm always like, the Adirondack Last Frontier. I don't know. Okay.
I'll look into that.
Homesteading TV, what can I say? So not only do we have to deal with these major international players, like we're now dealing with the big boys, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's what they're focused on and protecting themselves from. So we do need to be strong peace through strength. That's what we need to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, previous to the revolution and ever since the peace, there has been a constant necessity for keeping small garrisons on our western frontier.
Right.
No person can doubt that these will continue to be indispensable. If it should only be against the ravages and depredations of the Indians, these garrisons must either be furnished by occasional detachments from the militia or by permanent corps in the pay of the government. The first is impracticable, and if practicable, would be pernicious. And he's like, why would we do that to the people in the military? Why would we say, okay, it's time for you every 6 months to drag your family out to the western frontier to be a part of the camp, because we can't have a permanent standing army. So there are borders to protect.
Oh, really?
Oh!
Wait a tech.
Uh-oh. There are borders to protect.
Right.
There are precious, precious areas in America that are still at risk. And so we can't act like we never have attacks just because we've won the big war. We have to understand that there's always going to be little things. And we have to be realistic here, is what I think he's saying. He's like, let's be real.
Yeah, obviously. And it was a very basic concept for our founders at the time to recognize that a border or a nation doesn't exist, a sovereign nation doesn't exist without borders.
Yeah.
And
shocking.
Shocking, right?
I'm shocked.
This is one of those times where I'm going to go after libertarians, excuse me. But the libertarians don't believe that borders actually matter, even though they claim to care about the nation.
That's
and everything.
fascinating that they don't.
Well, it's really weird because they believe in this open society that doesn't want government rule or control or dominion over anything. But it's like, well, you care about America, but you don't care about our borders. That doesn't really track, because you can't care about America without caring about our borders.
Yeah.
Because America is not just an idea to be exported across the entirety of the globe. It is something that's confined within the walls of our nation and unique to our culture and our people, that were born here on our land and grew up in our soil and of our soil, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to care about our borders. Our founders did, and we should too. And yeah, the Western Front was something to be very weary of. The other thing that I think that Hamilton didn't even flesh out enough here, and like you said, this was a short paper, but I know it was on his mind, was the Indians, or the Native Americans, I guess if we're being politically correct, they could very easily be rounded up, recruited, and made to be conscripted soldiers for whatever foreign nation wanted to take advantage of them, right? So if Spain wanted to come in through Mexico and wage war on us from both the East and the West and block us in like that, they could. Wow. Mexico could do that through an alliance with Spain. They could do that, right? There's a lot of threats here. So if we don't hold off the West while also protecting the East and then be mindful of the Southeast, right, with the Indies, then we're going to be screwed. And you can't do any of that. You can't take care of all three fronts, and Canada, frankly, but they were French at the time, so we like the French, right? We can't take care of all three fronts. That's true. Without having a standing army, a permanent army that was, dedicated to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Connor, it makes basic sense. That's the thing. It's like, I totally get the anti-federalist worries. I think the anti-federalists were right in many ways. I'm thankful for them because we wouldn't have the Bill of Rights without them. And now we're seeing the insane growth of the central government, and it is concerning. And so I totally see the concerns. But on this paper, I'm leaning more federalist because it just makes sense. Publius kind of finishes off in a sassy way as usual. He says, "Can any man think it would be wise to leave such posts," speaking of like the Western posts, "such posts in a situation to be at any instant seized by one or the other of two neighboring or formidable powers? To act this part would be to desert all the usual maxims of prudence and policy. If we mean to be a commercial people, or even to be secure on our Atlantic side, we must endeavor as soon as possible to have a navy. And to this purpose there must be dockyards and arsenals, and for the defense of these, fortifications and probably garrisons. When a nation has become so powerful by sea that it can protect its dockyards by its fleets, this supersedes the necessity of garrisons for that purpose. But where naval establishments are in their infancy, moderate garrisons will, in all likelihood, be found an indispensable security against descents for the destruction of the arsenals and dockyards, and sometimes for the fleet itself." So I think that was a strong way to end, because it's also a reminder to the last papers. Remember the earlier papers? Like we had the one in the Navy, and then I posted the reel. In the Navy. I put that on Instagram as a reel. But there was a whole paper about the importance of the Navy if we wanted to get serious on the world stage for trade. If we wanted to get serious with our economy, we had to protect our navigable waters. And I'm really trying hard with that word here, you guys. But we have to have the Navy. And this also reminded me, I mean, when you look at like the National Guard, when you look at the reserves, when you look at the military itself, there are so many other jobs beyond just having the infantry guys and the guys that are going in and doing combat. Right. You have a whole industry that's created, a whole little world of, it's like its own little town. And it's because there are tons of little jobs that contribute to the big picture. And so I think that's kind of what he's hinting at here too, is they play such a bigger role than just going and fighting wars. And so it's important to consider that just for the upkeep of everything that we would need if we want to be a serious country and have peace through strength. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And the formation of our national military was one of the most genius things that they ever did. And it's sad to watch it be corrupted by the military-industrial complex like we talk about. But at the end of the day, if we can get those interests out of there, I think we can get back to being the pride of the world, really, and a strong, honest fighting force for good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Connor Clegg, thanks
Morgan
for joining us today.
Of
Thank
course.
you during your workday, spending a wonderful 45 minutes sitting with us.
Anytime. It's always the highlight of my week, frankly.
Grazie. I'm Italian. You guys, thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe on all podcast platforms and watch this video version to see our cute faces on YouTube. What do you know? We sit here and we have a blast with our James Madison statue. What is it called? Bust. Our James Madison bust sits between Connor and I on our beautiful set. So if you haven't seen that yet on Turning Point's page, you can watch the full video. But listen on podcast, give us 5-star review, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
You need to go pee-pee? You need to go pee-pee? Go poopy. You're fine. It's just rain, honey. You're not going to melt. Now, this right here is why I told you to come out here earlier and you wouldn't get out that bed. Now, hurry up. Don't you piss on my porch. Hey! You hear that thunder? Now, you better hurry it on up. Don't you piss on my porch.
Forget somebody's mom. That's you, and you know it. Foot stomp and all. Facts over feelings, honey. This is a conservative show, after all.
We choose truth over facts.
The Disney stuff just keeps getting worse, and I'm honestly starting to get really disturbed by it. I don't know if you've been watching the second season of Get Organized with the home edit, but it's one of my absolute favorite shows. There is some very sad news, however, about Clea, who's one of the founders. JoJo Siwa is taking her lesbianism to a whole new level. I don't know if that's a real word or not, but I like it. More damaging videos have come out about Will and Jada, and I got some really good questions in for Pop Quiz this week. I'm Alex Clark, and this is Politics. Just when you thought Disney couldn't get even more depressing, journalist Christopher Rufo has once again obtained footage from company Zoom meetings, and this time, Disney has announced that they would like to assist employees and their minor children with gender affirmation procedures. That means puberty blockers, breast removal, and genital surgeries for kids who are transitioning.
The other big area is gender identity and expression. So doing all of this work to ensure that our employees and cast can express their gender here authentically and proudly at the company. So, coming up with guides on how to change your photo, information about pronouns, working with our benefits team to give information about gender affirmation procedures, both for our employees who are transitioning and trans, but also our employees who have kids who are transitioning.
This is evil. Sorry, not sorry. Mutilating children is evil. Sterilizing and maiming healthy children is evil. Disney has always talked about Imagineering, but this is an entirely new level.
It's all right. The sea of raging hormones has ebbed.
I have been loving season 2 of the Home Edit show on Netflix. I know the two founders and hosts are really, really liberal lunatics, but the organizing is just way too good. I love it so much. Although I have laughed at the fact that every single episode I've watched so far has some sort of minority client in it. No one has been just straight or white that wasn't a celebrity. They're all black or gay or whatever. Just an observation that makes me laugh because it's like, bro, these shows are so obviously pandering, it's insulting, but whatever, not judging.
We know what you're up to.
I actually wanted to talk about the show because Clea announced that she has breast cancer. She just had a double mastectomy on Friday and said that she has 2 tumors that are 1 centimeter each. She wrote that they're aggressive and fast-moving, but she is hopeful because she caught it early. She also reminded her female followers to prioritize our health over our busy schedules and that we need to be doing breast exams and getting mammograms. She doesn't even have a history of breast cancer in her family, which is just really wild. She's a mom and a wife, and I just pray that she's gonna be okay. I also wanted to bring up her announcement to remind all of you to be doing those things. Schedule mammograms and go to your checkups, please.
I have to go to the doctor.
JoJo Siwa has done it. The lesbian chopperoo. Oh, I probably shouldn't be doing scissors when I'm talking about lesbians.
You like my hair? Gee, thanks. Just bought it. I see it.
Her signature side ponytail that she's had for 18 years is dead and gone. Overnight, she now definitely looks her age. I mean, she's a beautiful girl, and I think it's pretty clear that she can pull off any look, but she's kind of sad. Feels like the end of an era. I am interested to see if she's still gonna be doing these kid tours in her sparkly tutu or whatever, because now it just seems way too obvious that she's grown out of that.
Change it up. Just gonna make some love.
More uncomfortable videos of Will and Jada keep surfacing, and this one from 2019 of Will begging Jada to stop talking about their marriage and filming him on social media talking about their marriage is making me feel sick.
You know Esther Perel is coming to the table. She's going to be at the red table. Would you say she has been instrumental in you and I redefining our relationship?
I would say don't just start filming me without asking me.
Oh my goodness.
If you could film me.
Esther, come help us again, please. I'm still dealing with foolishness.
Because she don't just.
Would you say that she helped us heal the hurts that we caused between one another?
My social media presence is my bread and butter, okay? So you can't just use me for social media and not, don't just start rolling. I'm standing in my house. Don't just start rolling.
Please watch Esther at the red table because she's helped us a lot, can't you tell?
I don't know about you, but in like a week and a half, I've somehow gone from loving this man to hating him to feeling heartbroken and sorry for this guy. I hate divorce, but oh my gosh, I think they need to just walk away. They have already completely desecrated their vows by instituting an open marriage. And by the way, have you ever heard of two people having an open marriage where it actually ends well? Like happy and in love till death do them part? Think about that. I don't think I do. I am very disappointed. Very. Every Monday, I end the show by answering your questions sent to me through the link in the Politics bio. You can ask anything professionally, personally, or politically. Doesn't matter. I'll tell you the tea. It's time for Pop Quiz. Kelly from Florida asked, what is your favorite perfume? I love anything that smells sort of woodsy or smoky. I really like lavender and vanilla smells. So my favorite perfumes right now are Maison Margiela replicas in By the Fireplace and Coffee Break, which smell exactly how they sound. I'm also obsessed with the packaging. I also really like the YSL Libra perfume, which has lavender and orange blossom notes.
Hey, what is that?
Smell of success.
Danielle from Georgia asked, do you think conservatives have gone too far with their dislike of people in Hollywood and the term Hollywood elites? The term elites is fine. The only people that are triggered by that are the elites. And my personal opinion is that conservatives who say they hate pop culture and want nothing to do with it are liars. They all watch TV, they listen to music, they've got Twitter and Instagram. Everyone on the planet indulges in pop culture unless they're Amish. Shout out to the spillover guest Lizzie Enns for not subscribing to drama. There are different levels to how much people engage with pop culture, but everyone does to some extent, so who cares what we call them?
Every year, these liberal elites.
Bethany from Indiana asked, how did you and Nick meet? Well, we initially met because he worked at Turning Point, but we never talked or knew each other really or dated till last year when both of our best friends started dating, so we kind of started being around each other a lot. And because of that, everyone at work started rumors that we were dating when we weren't. Love that for us. And then because they were all saying that and we were annoyed, we thought, well, maybe we'll just try it out. And then we realized we're actually obsessed with each other and the same person. And you know, I think that everyone says, oh, he's my best friend, she's my best friend about someone they're dating. I don't really think that's true. I have definitely said that before about guys I've dated, but in reality, when I really thought about it, they weren't my best friend, okay? Nick and I are truly best friends. We love being around each other, period, for everything. I've never laughed more with anyone I've dated. I've never bonded more with anyone I've dated. When we're at a social event or like a party, he will seek me out just to be with me and talk and gossip in the corner like he cannot wait to tell me what just happened or what went down when, you know, I was talking to somebody else. Things that actual best friends would do. And I also think he's the most gorgeous man on earth. He acts like he hasn't seen me for 10 years. Every time he sees me, I don't know, how much time do we have?
Hey, who left this bowl of onions here?
Maeve from California asked, hi, Alex. I really want to start a podcast about culture, politics, and theology. I was wondering what advice you would have to get that started. Love you. I love you too. There's a lot of podcasts out there that cover these topics right now. So what is unique about Maeve that will make your show stand out amongst the rest? What will your show offer that none of the other shows cover? Once you figure that out, you can kind of carve out a little niche and you will be way more likely to succeed with a show.
My first time on a talk show.
If you thought of a question that you'd like to ask me, click the link in our bio and I might just read it next week.
Well, we'll frickin' see about that.
Tap the heart to support the show and everything we do. What did you think of that Will and Jada clip? Are you starting to feel sympathy for Will? Do you think that they should get divorced? I also need your thoughts on JoJo's hair and Disney funding gender reassignment surgeries for minors. There's a lot of freaking insane stuff in this episode, so do me a favor, just share it to your story. Tell people, okay, this is juicy, check it out, you gotta watch it, and then hit the save button. I will see you tomorrow right here at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Your Monday life hack is that in a pinch, you can carve realistic-looking Cheetos out of baby carrots. It's pop culture without the propaganda every single day. I'm Alex Clark, and this is Politics.
Clearly, Politics is best served visually, but you can also listen to Politics if you just want the audio. Subscribe to us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and more. Also, make sure that if you are listening to the podcast version, you leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget, subscribe to Politics on YouTube.